Good evening.
Good evening.
There you are. Welcome to the Tuesday, October 21st, 2008 meeting of the Glendale City Council. Mr. Kasakian, could you call the roll?
Council members Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Draymond.
Here. And our flag salute tonight is going to be led by Councilmember Quintero.
I'd actually like to have these three young men, these water polo players, come to the podium and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Right there. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for this evening's invocation. This evening, let us pray for the safety of our community members, our families, and loved ones, wherever they may be. We pray they are always free of danger and bodily harm. We pray for those who put their lives at risk serving in our nation's armed forces, defending our borders at home and our way of life thousands of miles away, facing incredible danger and threat to life. May this council strive to better our neighborhoods and businesses, upholding the values and morals that best reflect our Jewel City's character and integrity. Amen.
Mr. City Clerk, could we have your report, please?
The agenda for the October 21, 2008 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, October 16, 2008 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you very much. And the next item, please.
Presentation and appointments, and at 3A is agenda preview for the meetings of October 28, 2008.
Okay, and with that, let's go to Mr. Bob McFall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. For October 28th, the meetings throughout that day for both the Housing Authority and the Redevelopment Agency as the individual meetings. There's no specific action items. There is, however, a joint meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Housing Authority, where they will be addressing the report provided by the Director of Community Development and Housing regarding the status of the program planning for fiscal year 2009-10, the Community Development Block Grant Funding, and the Home Bill Action Plan. On the Glendale City Council, there are two items to consider that evening. The first is a report from the Fire Chief on the lease of fire department apparatus, and secondly, there will be a public hearing. This will be facilitated through the Director of Planning, and it will be an appeal design review board case number 2PDR 2007-100 AAP, probably more commonly known as 1749 Allen Avenue.
Thank you very much, Mr. McFall. Let's go to our next item, please.
4 is City Council and staff comments.
Let me turn to my colleagues. Before I do, let me thank you all, that is, my colleagues, thank you for all of your, I want to say, hard work on the weekend. It was a busy weekend event-wise, ladies and gentlemen, and the fall and winter tends to be that way for your elected officials. I was under the weather from late Thursday evening all the way through Sunday morning, so I certainly appreciate all of my colleagues for making all the events that they would have gone to anyway, but for going a little extra measure and representing me at those events as well. And with that, let me go to my colleagues, and I'll start on this end with Mr. Weaver.
I usually don't say much, but I did sit in for the mayor Saturday at Glen Oaks Park when they had refurbished the entire park. I used to play in that park back in the 1940s, and I neglected, and I got chewed out later, the Joe Bridges Clubhouse was redone structurally, stand up, and I talked about how my father and I were in the Cub Scouts in that building back in the 40s. And what I forgot was my mentor was Joe Bridges. He was very active in the city of Glendale. He mentored me onto the Glen Oaks Canyon homeowners and eventually onto the Homeowners Coordinating Council. I used to come here and speak, and he had a lot of credibility and people listened, even though he was an engineer. And he was greatly responsible, the man that made sure that Glen Oaks Canyon and Chevy Chase Canyon were never to be connected up by the Shoal Canyon complex. There was an effort to put a road through there, and he's the key guy that stopped it. He also helped me on the Sleepy Hollow subdivision, whatever. I could always turn to him. And when he passed on, I worked with other people to get the clubhouse named the Joe Bridges Clubhouse. So I forgot to mention that, so I apologize to my neighbors in the canyon for doing so, and it was nice to be there for that, and I thank you, Mayor. That's the one ribbon cutting I really did want to do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weaver. Mr. Quintero.
I also attended the event and had a chance to interact with Mr. Weaver's dog. Pleasant.
Well, thank you. Didn't bite him.
Pleasant dog with a beautiful coat.
And you had an extra pancake, too, which you fed to the dog.
But anyway, the staff did a great job on the clubhouse, and the whole park is just a jewel, certainly one of the jewels in Glendale's park system. Then I went on to the Duck Splash, where the Kiwanis had their annual event, and got to be the one that pulled the plug so all the ducks could go racing down the concourse. And there, not only do the Kiwanis organize this, but then they invite other nonprofits to set up booths and so forth, and that was an excellent event, and they're absolutely raising some serious money for the different charities that they promote. And then finally, last night, I was at La Crescenta at Clark High School, and the planning director and his entire staff was there for a second workshop on the general plan up on Foothill Boulevard and the adjoining areas. Extremely well attended, very productive. Everyone there was very enthused. Thought the staff did a great job. I don't have to tell you how Dr. Phil was able to handle the crowd, but it was very productive. I'm very happy that the planning director and the staff put this together. It was very well received, and it's certainly the first step in getting the people in La Crescenta and Montrose to begin to participate in their general planning issues. So congratulations to you, Mr. Agani. You did a wonderful job.
And for those listening in, you might want to explain what you meant by Dr. Phil, because
Well, I
we'll get emails.
always use that term, and it's a positive term. Mr. Agani is more than just a tremendous planner with a strategic vision and so forth, but he has the uncanny ability to go in with a crowd of people. In this case, they weren't hostile. They were actually very positive and wanting to interact, but getting even more from them, drawing like a good teacher does, or Dr. Phil on TV, who's able to handle difficult people. But anyway, he did a great job, and it's a term of endearment, obviously.
Mr. Najarian.
Thank you. I was able to attend the closing ceremonies of the third annual Glendale Friendship Games at Glendale High School. This was a series of games that took place for over a month: soccer, volleyball, table tennis, basketball. I may have forgotten one or two. Over 500, close to 600 athletes competed. It was probably their best year. There were some amazing table tennis matches. I saw one semifinal match between the national champion of Sri Lanka versus the number 5 ranked player in the U.S. And it is, you think hockey goes fast, the puck moves fast in hockey. In table tennis, sometimes it's only the sound of the little ping that lets you realize that it has hit the table, bounce, and then being returned by the other player. A very great game. Some of our own staff played against the Homenet Men seniors in a basketball game, and the Homenet Men seniors beat our team. I still can't figure that out. We had the youngest group, and these Homenet Men guys were, I mean, no kidding, they were like 60 years old and about One gentleman was about 5'4", and he's sinking three-pointers all over the field. So we'll have to work on our teamwork for next year. But the Hometomen organization was very grateful that the city played a role in those games, and it is a very positive event for the entire city and the region. I was also able to attend the opening of the William Saroyan photography exhibition at the Neighborhood Legal Services Center. These are photos taken when William Saroyan, of course our great American Armenian author, visited his homeland, of which he wrote about quite often, in 1976 and 1978. Some great photographs. They are on loan from the Fresno Museum. Neil Dudovitz, the director, was on hand and did make the announcement that through our federal judge, Dikran Tavrizian, and through his foundation, a grant has been made to staff a Armenian-speaking attorney to help not just Armenians, but any low-income individuals who need help in the legal system with any sort of problems that they may have. So it's great that Neighborhood Legal Services is providing that service and continuing to provide those legal services to the community. And my last question is, when are we going to see the pool again, Mr. Chapjan? I see you in the audience, or Mr. Starbird.
We know when it's on the agenda?
I know we had made some suggestions for redesign, and I think you were going to work on that and come back with some figures.
Absolutely. Mayor Draymond, members of the City Council, I think it's on for the 18th. We're going to first meet with the city manager next week. We had reworked a couple of concepts.
Okay. The 18th it is then, and we'll hold you to that. Is Mr. Ahern on board with that too?
Yes, he is.
Okay, he's not throwing cold water on the whole process, is he?
It may not be listed. We've got we have the agenda report being prepared, and it should be
Okay,
done.
I'm sure that that when our capable staff puts their scheduling efforts together, we can find room for that.
Oh, it should be done.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ahern. Mr. Chapman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Najarian. Councilmember Yusefian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also had an opportunity to go to Glen Oaks Park, since it's like 2 doors down from me, so it didn't take a lot of effort to kind of show up there at 8 o'clock in the morning, especially since they are preparing breakfast and I don't have to pay for it. So it was great, and so we ate, and Mr. Weaver made a speech, and we kind of walked around the park and talked to our constituents, and then ran to our next event. On that Saturday, I happened to have the housing fair that we have been advertising, and I think the people downstairs have a little clip. If they could show the clip of the housing fair, you could see people are coming to the fair, and there were several booths that were set up from the Neighborhood Legal organization. There is one of our staff people talking to the audience. I don't know who that person is. We had about a couple of hundred people who showed up during the day. There were a lot of issues that were talked about. A lot of housing issues was discussed. The smoking issue was discussed. We had a person there who basically told us about what the rules and regulations are. Neighborhood Services was there. There is the guy who is dealing with the smoking ordinance. And of course the issue of Section 8 was very big. Mr. Najarian was also there. And both of us were kind of corralled the minute we showed up with all kinds of questions from the public. Overall, it was a very successful event. It went from 2 to 5, and we had a very good turnout. The other thing I had an opportunity to do, thanks to Mr. Kasakian, who was the chair of Character and Ethics, I had an opportunity on yesterday from 8 o'clock till about
1:30 or 2, spent some time with a large group of youth. I was one of the mentors, and I think there were a lot of mentors there, including former council members, several commissioners, department heads, and on top of that, the person who did the speaking. I think our guest speaker was our current chief of fire, who gave a very good speech. And later on, we kind of spent some time discussing the issues with youth, as some of the dilemmas, what are ethical issues and what is not an ethical issue. One scenario that everybody most of the AP students were pretty good. They nailed it. They knew what was ethical and what wasn't. But what really caught them was the last item, talked about life, and it dealt with a software engineer who hears from his boss that they lost a big contract and they may be losing their jobs, and so the software engineer goes home and tells his wife, and his wife next day goes out there and sells their 500 shares of stock at $60 a piece, so that's $30,000, and the question was asked, do you think that was ethical or not? And to my surprise, a lot of the kids said, yes! I would do it if I was being fired next day, which to their disappointment later on we told them that was insider trading and it was illegal and they shouldn't do it. But nevertheless, I really did enjoy that. I thought it was a very good conference, and I want to thank Artie for orchestrating it, organizing it, and putting it together and giving me a call. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Yusefian. I just have one event to mention that I got to attend before the council flu that's been going along. It's been working this way across the dais, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yes, and I was I sort of was felled late Thursday evening. But let me talk about the event Thursday evening, and that was I don't know how to describe it other than the mega small business mixer, I guess you'd call it, at the Hilton. And it was the first time, to anybody's recollection, that this many merchants and chambers and business organizations throughout the entirety of the city of Glendale, every region of the city, either sponsored or showed up to participate in this mixer. And it was, of course, trying to deal a little bit in a small way with all of the events of the economy that we've been hearing about, plus a general slow economy that we've been experiencing the entire year. And one of the nice things, and Mr. City Manager, you'll be interested to know, is that one of the organizing groups asked if our next Glendale Small Business Task Force Summit, which we do quarterly. For those of you that don't know, it's a way that all of our business associations meet quarterly and discuss issues. A lot of it is how can the city help with business retention and business creation for small business. They would like to extend that summit out, which I think is currently scheduled. The next one is scheduled for November 3rd, I think. And they would like to, the same organizers would like to take that over and run with that ball. And I think that's a really wonderful thing. Anytime we can take a city staff and merge them with support from the private sector, that's a terrific thing. And they have some restaurants that have asked if they could host the next one. So if we could talk to Mr. Lanzafame, who usually sets those things up. That is exactly the kind of a success we've been looking for that Small Business Task Force Summit. So that's absolutely terrific, and my high esteem goes to to all of the merchants associations and all the chambers in the city that participated in this. Do we have any other staff members who have comments? Mr. Kasakian.
I want to thank Councilmember Yusefian for coming to the Youth Leadership Conference that was organized by the Character and Ethics Project of and the Glendale Unified School District is also a principal organizer of that. They help us get the students there who are from high schools in Glendale, Burbank, and La Cañada. I do want to say that I'm not the chair, I'm just chair for that event. I was a co-chair with Mike Seaton. The chairman of the Character and Ethics Project is actually our very own Deputy Fire Chief, Steve Howard. And we have a number of departments that were represented at yesterday's conference. We brought professionals with youth, Lucy Varpetian from the City Attorney's Office. We had a number of folks from police, including Lieutenant Stokes and Fox and others. Our very own Director of Redevelopment, Phil Lanzafame, was there as well, and former mayors, Eileen Givens and others were on hand. And for these students to be able to interact with these leaders who have real-life experience in their careers and their lives and share that with them is invaluable, leaves quite an indelible mark. I know because I was a participant 15 years ago when I was a student at Glendale High School in this very event, and it was an honor and privilege for me to help co-chair it this year.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kasakian. Are there any other staff comments? No? All right, then. Let's move on to the next item.
Next item is consent items, including minutes. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
Okay. I know that we have a request to pull 5E like Edward. I have no cards.
Move the item.
Okay, we have a motion. And a second. Let us vote on those. So if you'll call the roll, please, Mr. Kasakian.
For items A through D, council members Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Draymond.
Yes. Can we hear the item at 5E, please?
5E is Director of Public Works regarding Victory Truck Boulevard wastewater capacity improvements project, spec number 3002. At E1 is a motion authorizing an increase in the contingency by an amount of $980,000 for a total construction contingency of $1,477,000, and authorizing city manager to execute the necessary contract change order. At E2 is a resolution appropriating $980,000.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kasakian. Mr. Yusefian.
Like Mr. Zern explained this, I have a staff report, but I still want you to explain it for the public.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this particular project involves the upgrade of a sewer line that runs primarily through the back of the DreamWorks campus. What occurred is we're upsizing it, improving it, and trying to realign it so that the DreamWorks facility has the ability for future expansion and some current projects to have underway. As is typical when we put a sewer line in, we require underground utility information from all utilities, including the site owner, so that we know where the conflicts are in our design. In this particular case, we didn't know of a particular vault, electrical vault, that existed on the campus, and we had not received as-built plans for the campus itself, but for off campus. We discovered the vault at about the time we were starting the construction, and that affected our alignment. It was our plan to install the sewer through this particular portion, and we were going to use two primary methods of installing the sewer. One is what I'll call traditional, opening up the pavement in an open trench system, taking out the old and putting in the new. We were also using a trenchless technology for another part, and this is where you're able to, through a jacking process, by simply digging a hole, jacking a new piece of pipe without having to dig up and disrupt surrounding areas. Because of the vault and the fact that this vault is one of the main service connections to the DreamWorks facility, we had to realign the pipe in that area and go to a trenchless technology, which raised the price about $800,000. The additional money is for an additional contingency for this portion for any unforeseen items we may encounter when we are punching the pipe through, and that brings it to the $980,000.
We are doing this because, as of course of maintenance, we have to do it, or part of it we're doing so this will allow DreamWorks in future to expand?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Yusefian, this is an upgrade of a sewer line that serves a huge area in that part of town. This
So it
is a
has nothing
regular
to do with
upgrade.
DreamWorks.
DreamWorks is just one customer who uses that line, but this is far more reaching than their facility.
Because what I wanted to know, if it was affecting, if they were doing this because of DreamWorks, then they should participate in helping defray some of the cost. But you're telling me this is being done as of course of improving the sewer line.
Correct.
For everyone.
In general, for that area.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'll move 5E 1 and 2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on 5E 1 and 2. And if there is no other discussion, Mr. Kasakian, let's call the...
Councilmembers Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Draymond.
Yes. Next item, please.
Next would be oral communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we reserve oral communications to the end of the agendized items, with the exception of those speakers who voluntarily limit their time to 3 minutes in order to make public announcements. And our first speaker is Rosie Akopian, followed by Ron Farina.
Good evening, Mayor Draymond, City Council, and staff. My name is Rosie Akopian, and along with our club coordinator, Marine Arakelian, we would like to introduce a partial representation of our ORWP Titans water polo team of Glendale. And as the chair of the parent committee and also a member of the board for this Glendale-based nonprofit organization, I would like to announce that our 14 and under boys team has qualified to participate in the 2008 Speedo Cup Nationals, which are being held in Ann Arbor, Michigan this year, starting on November 7th. We are very proud of this team's success in becoming one of only 2 teams in the entire coastal region to be able to participate in this competition that starts with about 35 to 40 teams competing. There will be 12 teams total competing in this national tournament. The ORWP Titans team consists of 13 players, majority of whom are Glendale residents and they're Glendale students. And a few of the kids are also from neighboring cities of Burbank and LA. The entire team will be traveling to Michigan and hopefully bring home a medal for our Jewel City. And aside from this announcement of the competition, we would like to invite any community group or business or individuals that may be interested in this team's success to contact us for sponsorship opportunities. If anyone is interested, you can see us after this meeting, or you can contact us at phone number 818-640-7422. So on behalf of all the parents, the coaches, and the players, we thank you for your time and support, and we promise to come back with an announcement and hopefully some medals to show off for our city. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Najarian.
Would you gentlemen like to introduce yourselves? Say hello to friends and family.
I'm Armin Womjan. I go to Rosemont Middle School.
Great.
Very good.
I'm Asatul Gafayan, and I go to Thomas Starr King Middle School in Hollywood.
Good.
I'm Martin Chitalian. I go to Roosevelt Middle School in Glendale.
I'm Hakop Bagumian. I go to Toll Middle School in Glendale.
So where do you guys practice?
We practice at Hoover High School and also in Eagle Rock at Glassell Park Pool.
And how many hours a day do the kids?
2 hours a day.
2 hours. Water polo is a tough game. I used to play water polo before I was playing football. I was on the Bucknell University team, and we were 6th in the nation. So I can appreciate the strenuous activity. And for those of you that caught a glimpse of the Olympics, you could see just a little bit about water polo. It doesn't get that much attention throughout the sporting selection of sporting events, but you can only use one hand on the ball. You're treading water at all times, and underneath the water, the other players are grabbing at your bathing suit and other things, trying to pull you under and getting hit in the face with the elbows. So good luck good luck, gentlemen, and we hope you bring back some medals, trophies, and please let us know how you do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ron Farina, the Glendale Crescenta Red Cross, followed by Myrna Stanley.
You know, it's hard to follow the Titans, but I'm gonna try anyway. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members and city staff. I'm going to try one more time to bring our celebrity host here tonight to say a few words to the City Council and to the City of Glendale with the help of Artie. I'm here to plug the 17th Annual Comedy Night. And let's see if we can get Fritz Coleman to join us up here.
Hi, it's Fritz Coleman making my 17th annual request for your support for our comedy night to benefit the Glendale Crescenta Valley chapter of the American Red Cross. Your amazing response last year has pushed us to 2 shows this year. Sunday, November 2nd, 5 and 7 o'clock, Glendale Center Theater. Tickets are $25. Available at 818-243-3121 or arcglendale.org. I'm telling you, it's laugh therapy for a troubled nation. I hope to see you there.
Wow. Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Fritz.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come back again.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Artie.
All right, our next speaker is Myrna Stanley, followed by Leon Mayer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Myrna Stanley, and I'm addressing you on behalf of the Citizenship and Patriotism Committee of the Glendale Chamber of Commerce. We had a meeting today, and among the items we discussed was Veterans Day on November 11th, and it seems that some of the members of the committee have been asked by residents what it is the City of Glendale does for its veterans on November 11th. Given the proximity of that date, what we are asking is if you would please consider at least putting up a banner at City Hall thanking the veterans. And in that such a small tribute, I think, would go a long way in recognizing our veterans and would be very much appreciated by the committee. I realize you can't make a decision on that because it's not on the agenda, but we wish you would, and we thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Quintero.
That sounds like a wonderful idea. And how about a banner over the bridge there at the college? Certainly will be seen by everyone. Thanking the, well, not just Glendale veterans, but just thanking veterans in general.
Mr. Starbird, is that something that...
He's writing it down.
Are you making a note? Is that, are you drawing it out?
I'm making a note. We'll look into it.
Just a basic banner.
All right. Thank you. Very good idea. Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Starbird, Mr. Howard, and staff. My name is Leon Mayer, and I'm here on behalf of the Glendale Library and the Friends of the Library. Now, the Glendale Library itself, in conjunction with the Friends, is putting on One Book, One Glendale. We've already had one event last Thursday, which was a terrific event, and we're having another event on the One Book, One Glendale, November 5th. That will be Sonia Nazario, the author of Enrique's Journey, the story of a boy's dangerous odyssey to reunite with his mother. And this will be November 5th, 7 o'clock. Sonia Nazario is a Pulitzer Prize winner in 2002 for her series involving immigration and problems involving immigration, and she lives in Southern California, and she'll be there to sign her book and talk to the audience, and that should be a great event. I want to compliment Mary Alice Wallum and Pat Sider, who are the co-chairmen of the One Event, One Glendale book, and they work at the library. They're career librarians, and they helped us put on a terrific program last Thursday. Now, this coming Tuesday, we're going to have Ernest Borgnine talk about his book, an autobiography called Ernie. And Ernie is well known to millions of people. He's well known to people in Glendale. and he'll be there in person to sell his book. Don't bring any memorabilia because he'll only sign his book. And you're free to come there without buying the book. But he will buy the book. He'll talk to you while you're buying the book. He'll talk to everybody there, and it should be a great event. And we've had people from time to time in the community that work with us in putting on these events. We had Porto's Bakery occasionally, and I'm not sure, maybe I shouldn't be commercializing that, but in any event, we had John Krikorian, who put on Jerry Tarkanian, helped us put on Jerry Tarkanian with the senior living, and he has also worked with us on the Ernie Borgnon case. So if that's not appropriate to mention these names, I'll stop doing that. But
there's nothing controversial about Ernest Borgnine. So,
okay,
no.
That event.
Except that he was married to Ethel Merman at one point. So
that was one of his.
Might be the only question.
That was one of his 5 marriages.
Yes.
That
event. That's a short chapter in his book.
There you go. That's next Tuesday, and I have flyers here. I'll go back to the audience, and you can tell me about that if you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, that was our last speaker for that portion of oral communications. Let's move on to the next item.
Next item is adoption of ordinances. At 7A is urgency ordinance amending section 105.3.2 of the 2007 Glendale, California Building Code, adopted as Volume 1 of the Glendale Building and Safety Code, 2008, as amended, relating to the expiration of building plan reviews and declaring the urgency thereof, offered on October 14, 2008 by Councilmember Yusefian.
Okay.
Move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. I have no speaker cards from the public. Is there any discussion on this item?
I do.
Councilmember Najarian.
My only hesitation in approving this is that the new building codes have adopted more stringent safety measures in several areas. By extending this period to December 31st, although it makes administratively Mr. Stewart Tom's job easier to handle, to deal with, I just want to say that I do have some misgivings about passing a more stringent safety code, building code, and then extending the time in which the safety measures are to be enacted. I haven't gone through the code. I'm not a contractor. I know this is difficult. Mr. Tom indicated that he's balancing economic conditions versus the need to implement these additional safety measures. Mr. Tom, can I ask you a question? Is there anything that is being delayed? In other words, additional safety measures that would be delayed by extending the time period under the old code that you see as critical safety issues? At one point, I understood the pool drains. There's an extra safety measure in pool drains which prevent youngsters from being sucked in against the lower intake that the new code covers, that the old code did not. Am I correct in understanding that?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think the best way to describe it is actually something that we discussed lightly last week when the ordinance was introduced. California as a state, every 3 years, does adopt a new code, but as a result of the fact that it does it so frequently, those changes are incremental. What you're referring to, which is a provision under the new code that will require anti-entrapment devices, is actually already in the code that we presently or previously enforced. The new code provision which will take effect is a clarification or refinement of that. I think that the best thing that I could do is just help everybody understand that while the code is changing and there are some revisions to the safety procedures, that from a holistic standpoint, the code that was previously in effect that these plans were submitted for was a code that provided a reasonable level of safety. We're not extending these projects or allowing them to be constructed over an older code that was perhaps in place a decade ago. This was the previous code. And so in that regard, when I explained last week that I balance the economic situation and that so far I personally have approved every single request that has come to me. In fact, I have approved a small number of them all the way until the same date that your action before you is extending, December 31st. That's because I do not feel that for the projects that are affected by this, there is a situation that would put occupants of those buildings at severe risk.
Balancing the equities, Mr. Tom, clearly the economy is having some difficulties, especially in the credit arena. After December 31st, would you personally have difficulties extending this any further?
After December 31st, we get to a different point because the December 31st date is a consideration that I find relatively easy to extend a project to. As I explained before, that is the date to which any project could be constructed in our city under the old code. I think that what we would really need to do, which this action affords the council and the city at large to do, is to take a look at the policy issues to determine whether or not a whole-scale change beyond that is something that would be appropriate. And we would have the time to take a look at that and work with the council.
Okay, I have a feeling that we may be facing that.
I have a feeling we will.
December 31st. And I do want to make sure that we are doing as much as we can to enforce the new safety provisions. As incrementally beneficial as they might be, I mean, our series, everything builds on its past, on its history. So, I'm willing to go ahead with it this instance, but let's have a serious discussion about the safety issues come December 15th. I'm not sure when we may realize that we're going to have a continuing issue, but let's have a chance to discuss that more fully.
Thank you, Mr. Najarian. Let me ask you, Mr. Tom, since my colleague raises this issue again, holistically speaking, how many children in the state of California do you know of statistically have been trapped in pool drains, say, this year?
I don't know the number. I don't think any this past year at all.
I don't know that there are or there aren't, but we're talking about it as though, you're speaking about it as the building official, as though there is some weight behind it that says that you are aware of something, and I just wanted to clarify it. I suspected you did not. And we're talking about using that, we're incorporating that theory in a holistic approach. Somewhere buried in all of that, what I thought I heard you say was that you don't have any particular concerns or difficulties with what we're about to vote on. Is that what I understand you to say?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Quintero and Mr. Yusefian.
Yeah, so the codes are basically updated every 3 years in the state of California. Is that what you said?
That's correct.
Right. And they're incremental. In some cases, I would assume that they pretty much stay the same. Is that correct? There might be something that's learned in earthquake research that might lead you to change some structural, but other parts of the code, I suppose, are carried over from the previous 3 years.
For the most part, that is the case. The codes that evolve over time only experience refining changes in areas where we learn that the codes are somewhat deficient. And
Or new
therefore-
materials or...
New materials, new techniques,
and-
and things that we learn about certain types of exposure risks to the public. In California, primarily, those fall into the range of fires and seismic events.
Mr. Yusefi.
Mr. Tom, the Americana, was it approved under which code? Was the UBC or the other one?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the Americana was approved when the code, which was in effect, was a 1997 UBC-based code.
Okay.
However, one thing that would support the matter that's before you today is consideration of the fact that a number of modifications were granted for that project to enable certain portions of that project to be constructed under the code that's in effect right now. And the reason that we did that was we found that we could balance some of the provisions in both codes and still achieve a safe project.
Right, but legally it had to just meet the 1997 code because it was turned in at the time?
Oh, that's correct. The code that was the yardstick, so to speak, for the Americana project was the previous code.
Question number 2. Under what code was the Embassy Suite constructed?
That was also the previous code, the 1997 UBC-based code.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get to is that you're right, codes change very little unless there's a major earthquake, then they change that section of it. Like shear panels, you could put as many nails because they counted the nails, and sometimes you could put them 1.5 inches apart, and found out that when the earthquake hit, it just tore up that plywood like nothing. So now you have to put them further apart, maximum of, you can't go any further, closer than 4 inches, and you have to be a certain type of nail so it doesn't split the 2x, or it has to be double. But everything else just changes small amount. Like in commercial part, it goes from a 1/2 inch copper pipe to a 3/4. Now it's required all the way to the end, and then you could go ahead and put your faucet, while before you could put a 1/2 inch. I think what I'm trying to say to my colleague is the changes are minor, but nevertheless, code, it changes incrementally unless you have a major catastrophe. And then they come back and they go, the code that we had, that everybody built under, didn't work because when this catastrophe happened, these were the failures. And at that point, the code is modified to adjust for that. Am I correct? And I mean a major catastrophe, I'm talking about like the earthquake code. We came back and we changed all the moment frames and some of the things you could do and you can't do after 94 earthquake. There was a huge amount of change that was done.
The 1994 Northridge earthquake was an example that had some significant changes, but for the most part, you are correct. Changes are incremental, and then there are some changes to the code which may not be incremental. They may introduce for the first time a requirement, but as the mayor pointed out, that may not be indicative of a problem that is pervasive. It just identifies a problem. So simply because a new requirement is placed in the code does not mean that by not adopting that code, there will all of a sudden be an increase in the frequency of accidents that previously did not exist. The fact that we adopt or do not adopt a code is not going to change human behavioral issues.
What I'm trying to get to is that some of these, like Americana, is not an unsafe building.
No, not at all. Americana is a safe project.
Neither is any of these high-rises that we have built. Some of them are 20 years old, 30 years old. They're still very safe buildings, to an extent, at the time that they were built. So it's not that they're going to crumble tomorrow. But we're talking in here a difference between a 3-year, we're talking, what, a 1-year difference?
That's okay, sir.
I don't understand the question.
What is the difference between the new code and the old code? What is the time difference? 3 years. You said every 3 years you adopt it. We just did one, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the oldest code was,
Without getting into too much detail,
when did we adopt the new code?
we adopted this code November of 2007, and it took effect January 1st of this year.
Okay.
All right. Councilmember Najarian.
Did we have any discretion in terms of adopting that code or not? Mr. Tom?
Which code?
No, we did not. Pursuant to the state's health and safety code, we are mandated to adopt the state's building code. We are allowed to locally amend it and make it stricter if we can make one or more of three specific local findings that it's necessary to adequately protect our community.
Make it stricter.
To make it
We had
stricter.
no option to continue operating under the previous code.
No, we didn't.
Okay. And there's a reason for that. That's a state law. And I don't want to, my whole point here is that I don't want to minimize these advancements, these incremental advancements in the building code. What we've heard is that changing plans to meet these new codes may cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for the builders. This just isn't you use a quarter-inch pipe or you use a different type of nail. These are significant replanning and re-engineering issues. I just want to state for the record that I'm very uncomfortable in extending this any further than December 31st. I'm willing to give any benefit of the doubt in consideration for the financial atmosphere currently, but anything over that, my concern for continuing to implement the utmost in safety codes in our building code, I may be alone in that, but to implement that without any additional delay.
Mr. City Manager.
And Mr. Mayor, Mr. Najarian, you'll have a chance to discuss that, the broader policy question of both the planning items as well as any extension beyond January 1 is tentatively scheduled for your November 4th City Council meeting.
Okay. And that will be coming back. I just one other question. Do we, the International Building Code that this council has moved to, are you implying that it was mandatory for this council to adopt that?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And I think what Mr. Yusefian was getting at was very simply the exact same question I asked you last week, which is, are we implying by this that we're in an unsafe building right now? And I think your answer was categorically no.
That's correct, and that is still my answer. This building is not unsafe.
Right. And this was not built under the International Building Code, nor was Americana, nor were these other things. Not to say that we don't pay attention to safety or that we're running some risk. It's that we're, when we're talking about balancing issues, I think every one of us up here, and probably everybody out there, believes that we need to be careful as to how we balance those issues, but I just don't want the impression going out to the public that this city council is selling off the public's interest in public safety because of the economy. And to the extent that I'm hearing that implication somehow sliding around, either there or here, I just want to make it clear that this council member is not saying that, and I'm not picking that up from any one of my colleagues. So, in any case, I just want to once again go on the record with that. The item at 7A is, perhaps we should hear it again, Mr. City Clerk, if you don't mind.
Would you like me to read that?
Would you mind, because it doesn't really have much to do with what we're talking about up here for most of this discussion, and I've been getting little signals from this side trying to get us back on point. So let's hear it again, and then...
Well, the item that is before us, and it has a motion and a second, is the urgency ordinance amending Section 105.3.2 of the 2007 California Building Code, adopted as Volume 1 of the Glendale Building and Safety Code 2008, as amended, relating to the expiration of building plan reviews and declaring the urgency thereof.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a motion, by the way?
Yes, we do, and we have a second.
All right, very good. Is there any other, I don't have any speaker cards on this. Is there any other debate on this issue?
We'll leave it for the 4th.
Okay, let's call the roll.
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Draymond?
Yes. Okay, could we hear the item at 7B, please?
7B is adoption of Royal Boulevard Historic District Overlay Zone. B is motion verifying 20% protest, and 1 is ordinance amending the zoning map to reflect a new zoning designation related to the Royal Boulevard Historic District Overlay Zone. This was offered on October 14, 2008 by Councilmember Quintero.
Okay, let me ask a housekeeping question, if I might, from our city attorney. This was a hearing from last week. We opened that hearing, we closed that hearing. As far as I know, there is nothing new that has been added. I do have a speaker card, and we did request of Mr. Platt that he come back and update us on a particular item.
You are correct. Nothing has substantially changed. There is a motion before you that didn't exist, that wasn't before you last week, and that is to verify the 20% protest. It was in the staff report and fully laid out. It would be in the mayor and council's discretion to limit speakers since the public hearing has been closed and there has been no substantial changes. Now, if Mr. Platt provides additional information upon which you're going to be making your decision, and you do have speakers, I might suggest that you reopen the hearing for a limited purpose of hearing from those speakers for perhaps a minute or two.
All right, very good. Mr. Platt, if you wouldn't mind also, excuse me?
You didn't say the words you were opening the hearing.
I'm not opening a hearing. The hearing was open last week and closed. Mr. Platt was asked, I think, by Councilmember Najarian to do a little bit of public outreach, and I'd like an update for him and for us on that.
After last week's hearing, the next day, on Wednesday, I drafted a letter that was delivered by me personally to the homes of the 6 homes in opposition who signed the opposition petition in May of 2007. We set up a meeting for Thursday evening, recognizing that it was very short notice, but we did set up a meeting at the Municipal Services Building in the Planning Department office beginning at 6 o'clock p.m. I was in the office from 6 o'clock until 7:30, and no one came to attend the meeting. In the notice that I gave to the opponents of the district, I did note that it was definitely short notice. We knew that. We apologized for that, and that I would be available by phone or by email to either meet personally or by phone or email with anyone who had any questions or issues they wanted to discuss. And as of 6 o'clock tonight, I didn't receive any calls or emails.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Platt. Mr. Najarian.
I had understood that you had a conversation with Mrs. Ironman. Did you have a chance to speak with her?
I spoke with Mrs. Ironman after the hearing. At that point, we discussed the possibility of having the neighborhood meeting in her living room so that we could be on Royal Boulevard for the meeting. And on the evening of Tuesday last week, she thought that would be a good idea. On Wednesday, she had a change of heart and decided that that wouldn't work for her. And she did thank me for reaching out and did send me an email saying that she couldn't attend the meeting on Thursday, but that we pretty much understood her views.
Anybody else with a question for Mr. Platt? Thank you very much, Mr. Platt. All right. I have one speaker card, and I think that we can do that. And this is someone we haven't heard from.
Reopen the public hearing for the limited purpose of hearing from this one individual, and certainly it's within the mayor's prerogative to place a time limit on that.
And that is exactly what I will do. This individual we haven't heard before, so I will reopen the hearing for that limited purpose, and that speaker is Mr. Friesen, E.N. Friesen.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and audience. I'm E.N., otherwise known as Nick Friesen, citizen of Glendale, and I'm here in support of this historic district. It's a historic event as well as a historic district for the entire city of Glendale. My principles are the less government, the less regulation, the better. But I believe that this is one regulation which will be of benefit to all of the current and future citizens of the city. We need to preserve our historic buildings, our history, and our background, and so I'm here in support of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Friesen. I have no other speaker cards, so I'll once again close the public hearing, and I will turn to my colleagues for a comment or input. I'll start at this end this time. Mr. Yusefian.
No comments.
Mr. Najarian.
I just have some brief comments. I was very hopeful that Dr. Phil and his surrogate could work some magic and allay the fears and the concerns of those 32% frontage owners in the historic district. I'm sorry that you were not able to do that. My problem is that initially, and I've been to Royal Canyon before, and I've been to their annual block party, and I did express my support for historic districting at that time, not just for Royal Canyon, but for any neighborhood in Glendale that qualifies. But when I made those comments, I never envisioned the type of situation that we're faced today, with 32% of the frontage owners objecting to the creation of the district. And I can deal with a few loose ends and a few disgruntled homeowners should they be sprinkled throughout, one here, one there. But what we're looking at is a group, 66% of the homes in that first block are against the historic district. It's very troublesome to me. It's not what I envisioned when I looked forward and tried to visualize how historic districting would be. I did envision a near unanimous support from neighborhoods. I really didn't envision the type of opposition that we have here that obviously is giving rise to the unanimous vote of the council, the requirement for a unanimous vote of the council. That being said, I am going to vote for the historic district, but with, I'm not going to sleep well tonight, because I think at some point someone has to stand up for a legitimate minority who are being drawn into a historic district. It was my wish that they be excluded and the rest of the neighborhood be given their historic standing. I did hear from Mr. Agani and Mr. Platt that no, that wouldn't work out. It's a critical component. So I am going to go ahead and vote for it, but I want everyone to know, all of those, if it's only 6 homes, 6 out of the 8, or whatever those numbers were, that I did have many thoughts about how I was going to go forward with this. I am going to go for the district. I'm sorry that I'm not standing up for your rights as homeowners, but in this case, I'm looking at the overall good for the community. I hope that any other community that is considering historic districting, whether that's the Ardeven Highlands or any other area, please try and get everyone on board. Do the outreach. Explain to them exactly what it means. Because it is a very difficult decision for me, at least. I don't know about my colleagues when I see those homes there blocked out in yellow who are against this. But for this evening, for Royal, I am going to go ahead and approve the district.
Okay, I am very pleased and happy to move the ordinance at
let's
7B1.
Stop for a moment here. Mr. City Attorney.
I think in order to process 7B would be the first item. That's the motion to verify the protests, and then separately we would handle the ordinance.
Actually, and at the moment, what I'm hoping for is if there are any other comments before we get to a vote, but...
Mayor, I'll move 7B,
right,
which is the verification of the 20% protest.
Second.
All right. Let's continue on, though, with whatever comments there are.
on the 20%?
Well, I have to entertain my comments from my colleagues, even if it's just the motion on the 20%, Mr. Weaver. So I'm asking.
Yeah, I thought you were separating. Okay.
I'm asking if there are comments or input from our colleagues. Mr. Yusefian.
Mr. Mayor, the question was asked from staff last time to verify the 20%. So for public, has it been verified?
Over 20% of the frontage of the properties that
Has
are
been verified.
Has been verified.
Thank you.
Any other comment? All right. We have a motion and a second on the verifying the 20% protest, and now we have, let's call it.
Council members Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Draymond.
Yes.
Okay, I will happily move the ordinance at 7B1.
Second.
Motion and a second, and let's
And
hear
I
if
do
there are
have,
any comments.
yeah, I do have a comment. I am joining my friend, Mr. Friesen, a man with strong libertarian principles, who chose to come down tonight and speak out on behalf of the ordinance. But I mean, we went through this last week. I think we're all in agreement that this is a historic move on the part of the city of Glendale. On the other hand, we're joining literally hundreds and maybe even thousands of cities across the nation, and I'm sure in Canada, that have chosen to do historic districting. It's excellent experience for everyone, and so I'm glad we've finally chosen to do this and beat Stockton, I believe it was, Mr.
To leave Stockton
Brennan?
behind, yes.
Not Bakersfield. Bakersfield may have it, but certainly we beat Stockton.
Okay, Mr. Weaver, any comment?
Well, let's vote.
Okay. Well, yes, Mr. Yusefian, I'm sorry.
I have one comment, and I'll drag Mr. Weaver into this somehow. I've been here for 7.5 years. Dave has been here for 10.
No.
More.
12.
Dave, let me ask you a question. Have we ever voted on any kind of an ordinance or a law that there has been 100% agreement in the city of Glendale from the constituency that we represent?
Not that I can recall.
Yeah. Not that I recall either. I will tell you, we all try to strike a balance. We always try to do what's good government and serve majority of the public. And I have been one of those people who have stood up for the little guy and the minority in many cases, gotten beaten up, but that's okay, because I felt that was the right thing at the moment. Nevertheless, I'm no fool. I know that you can never please everyone. Give you an example. When we bought Oakmont 5, after going through hearings, rooms of over 800 to 1,000 people saying, please buy it, and when we did, lo and behold, there were articles in the paper saying, how dare you buy that hillside? So there is no such thing as pleasing everyone. So I hope there's some solace in that, my fellow councilman. I know sometimes it's very difficult, but I'm glad that we're just going to do this because, in my opinion, I think this is good government.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yusefian. Well, for my own part, I'm not sure I know what to say at this point, except to say that I am extremely happy to support this. I've said most everything I wanted to say on the subject last week. I could add to what Mr. Yusefian was just saying with several other examples. More recent than 12 years ago, you all approved a business improvement district in Adams Square. Just before, not long before I came to this council. Again, you didn't have the buy-in of every business in that tenant-based BID. 1968, you created the city's first BID, the Montrose Shopping Park BID. You didn't have 100% buy-in there. You all have changed zoning in this city many times, and your predecessors and our predecessors have done that. There's not 100% buy-in when you change the zoning. And you stopped this process at one time to make sure that all of the interests of as many people involved within the boundaries of a potential historic district were looked after. And that was extended primarily because Councilmember Yusefian felt that that was an important thing to do, and he had the backing of Councilmember Manukian. And there was another look at that, and a stronger ordinance, a better ordinance, was created in the process. So I think that's where the interests of the little guy and the interests of the dissenting parties came into play. That's where you looked after their interests. But to vote to approve every step of this process all along the way, and by the way, unanimously at each turn, and to consider stopping it now after you've asked every hoop to be jumped through and every I to be dotted and every T to be crossed, I just don't know what to say to that, except that I am happy that we apparently will be able to move forward. Those are my comments on it. I don't know if anyone else has any comments, but if they don't, then we have a motion and a second. And Mr. Kasakian, looks like we're at that point.
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Draymond?
Yes. That ordinance has been adopted. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next item, please.
At 8, under action items, at 8A is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding opposition to Proposition 7, Renewable Energy Generation Initiative Statute. That's A1, resolution opposing Proposition 7.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steiger.
Mayor Draymond.
Let us go to you. You are the General Manager of Glendale Water and Power. Item 8A has your title on it, so let's turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Draymond and members of the City Council. I'm here tonight to give a brief overview of California Proposition 7, which is officially known as the Renewable Energy Generation Initiative Statute, or as it's alternately known as the Solar and Clean Energy Initiative. I'm here tonight to give you an overview and request support for GWP's opposition to this proposition. And just as some background on the proposition, essentially the key and primary point of the proposition is to greatly increase the amount of renewable energy required to be procured and distributed by all utilities in the state of California, including municipally owned utilities such as GWP. Specifically, it requires a 20% renewable by 2010, 40% by 2020, and 50% by 2025. It also grants the California Energy Commission the power to enforce compliance of the Renewable Portfolio Standard upon government-owned municipal utilities, again, such as GWP. It deletes GWP's current exemption from the state-mandated RPS Renewable Portfolio Standard, and in general creates certain penalties if these portfolio standards are not met. It also requires that during this period, at least 2% per year renewable energy be added. If that's not accomplished, there is a 1 cent per kilowatt hour penalty imposed upon the utility for that particular year. And quite frankly, there's no way we can guarantee that in any given year we can achieve an additional 2%, nor can we guarantee that we can reach these types of renewable standards within the period of time. It's a noble effort to do so, but to guarantee it would be very, very difficult. creates other problems, such as the transmission required to import 50% of renewable energy into Glendale. As you're most likely aware, most of renewable energy, certainly 50%, would have to be imported into Glendale from other areas, in many cases from areas quite far from Glendale. Already, today, there are numerous impediments in providing additional transmission for this purpose. We're hard at work at providing that and working to make sure that over time we get to that point. However, this particular proposition has not been well written. It's not well crafted. It does not serve the residents of Glendale well, particularly in the fact that it requires a significant cost increase. It's difficult for us to put a true number on the cost increase of this particular proposition, but it's fair to say that it would add approximately 25 to 30% to the average customer's bill. So for those reasons and others, and we can discuss them if you'd like, we strongly recommend opposition to the proposition.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Steiger. I'm sure there are some questions for you. Mr. Weaver.
Steiger, please discuss the one issue that to me is the most important. What the state does in terms of being able to control our own utility that they can't now.
Correct. As it stands now and as it has since the beginning of Glendale Water and Power, we are, as a municipal utility, totally locally controlled, as we see here. This particular proposition would shift that control, and it would shift some of, not all, but some of the control of GWP to, first of all, the California Energy Commission, and ultimately to the California Public Utility Commission. It would erode local control, specifically as it applies to renewable energy, and also as it applies to the siting requirements for both new generation and transmission. So it has a major impact on our ability to maintain local control.
And therein lies the problem. It's very deep within the proposition.
Right.
Other comments or questions for Mr. Steiger? Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, I have some comments. I absolutely endorse the goals of Proposition 7, the goal of establishing additional higher renewable portfolio standards. I think that is where this state needs to go, the city of Glendale's utility needs to go, and obviously the country needs to go. Unfortunately, the way this proposition is written, I don't believe it would help us get to those goals as a utility or even as a state. And it's too bad, because I think the voters of California are ready to spend more money and get more involved with renewable energy. There's no question that that's the future, and it's just unfortunate that whoever put this together just didn't do it properly. And there's an awful lot of organizations that feel the same way. The California League of Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, numerous consumer groups, you name it. So this is obviously a flawed proposition. Now, turning to the actual motion, I would like to, I agree with the resolution as written. All of the whereases I absolutely agree with. However, 1, 2, 3, the fourth whereas, where it says that Proposition 7, Renewable Energy Generation Initiative statute, would require Glendale to generate 20% of their power from renewable energy by 2010, 40% by 2020, 50% by 2025. I'd like to take that out. That, to me, is not a reason that I wouldn't vote for this. I would vote for it with those requirements, but the rest of it I agree with. So when it comes time for the resolution, maybe we can talk about that. I mean, we're just kidding ourselves if we think that somehow by not setting higher and higher standards for renewable energy that we're saving money, or somehow we're not doing the right thing. The price of energy will go up. This downward blip isn't anything to write home about, because slowly the trend will go up. So I just think we need to keep working on our renewable energy portfolio. I'm just convinced of that. Not only us, not just GWP, but every one of us in California and in the U.S. Those are my comments.
Okay, Councilmember Najarian.
Mr. Steiger, what's our current renewable portfolio percentage?
Approximately 16%.
And what's our target? I know we had set some targets a few years out.
We have it. The current target is 20% by 2017. However, we're on track to get there far sooner than that.
And in the marketplace, are you seeing additional renewable sources coming online at more competitive prices, or is it kind of stagnant lately?
We are seeing a much more competitive renewable market, particularly in the wind and solar area. There's a significant potential for geothermal. Unfortunately, the geothermal isn't quite as price competitive as the solar and wind, but on the other hand, geothermal is more reliable than solar and wind. So we are seeing a more competitive market, yes.
And it's our general policy to analyze these renewable resources as the opportunities become available for our general portfolio.
Absolutely. We're looking at a number of projects right now. Many of the projects that we get involved with are through SCAPA, Southern California Public Power Authority. And through SCAPA right now we're looking at a number of wind projects, some geothermal projects, and some solar projects.
Okay. So what Mr. Quintero said is true, that we are currently actively seeking out renewable sources. We've developed the program, what's it called, the Green Energy, where you can, through a slight surcharge, you're actively guaranteeing that the power, of course you're not segregating the electrons, but you're symbolically allocating the green energy to the users who choose to pay the true cost of what the renewable energy.
Yes, and in that particular program, this is the first time we've actually gone out, procured a specific wind project, and then allocated that project to the green power program.
So in lieu of Prop 7 going down, please let's keep up our own efforts. I think everyone on council is supportive of that. Seek the renewable sources.
Councilmember Yusefian, anything?
Okay, well, I'd like to make the motion at 8A1, but I would like to drop that.
Strike that paragraph.
Yeah.
Is there a...
Ask Mr. Steiger what he thinks of that.
I would agree with that. We're not opposed to increasing our renewables portfolio.
Okay, I'll second.
So the motion with that change, with that modification, and we have a second. Is there any other discussion? Mr. Kasakian.
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Abstain.
Mayor Draymond?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Steiger.
Thank you.
Talking a nuclear plant.
The next item, please.
8B is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding GWP Identity Theft Program in accordance with the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Fact Act of 2003. B1 is a resolution approving the GWP Identity Theft Program.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do you have cards?
I do have one card, yes. Excuse me, no, I don't. That's for the next item.
Moved item. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any input from the council? Hearing none, I will turn to the city clerk, Mr. Kasakian.
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Draymond?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Steiger.
Thank you.
And the item at 8C, please.
At 8C is Director of Public Works regarding report regarding rates, time limits, hours of operation for parking meters and multi-space meters in the downtown core district, establishment of a new parking meter zone, adjustments to parking meter and multi-space meter time limits, hours of operation and rates. At C1 is an urgency ordinance for introduction, and at C2 is a motion directing staff regarding operating hours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kasakian. let us go to our Director of Public Works, Mr. Zern.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, on October 7th, we came before you with this item in a sort of pre-ordinance package to gain your feedback and to lay out for you what we were planning to do in regards to parking and parking rates in the downtown area. Essentially, what we were presenting was, as a follow-up to council's previous approval of multi-space meters on Brand Boulevard, was to revise the code to create a parking meter zone on Brand, to establish a rate for these new meters. We also were proposing to revise the rates for all other on- and off-street parking meters, and to make revisions to the rates in our parking garages, both hourly and monthly. And we were proposing to extend the hours of enforcement from 9 to 6 to 6 to 10. Following that, we had the discussion. Council added a number of other issues they wanted us to include. And I'm going to go over those to make sure I captured them, and we can discuss some of those, because staff has some follow-up on a couple of the items, and I'm sure you're aware and have been contacted by the Merchants Association, who also has some comments. First one was a recommendation that we delay the hours, extending the hours of enforcement until after the first of the year, January 09. The second was that we create an exemption for zero-emission vehicles, ZEV vehicles, for all aspects of parking, on-street, off-street, meters, and in the garages. We were also asked to look at implementing a fee exemption in our 3 parking garages for anyone who possessed a valid California disabled placard. There was also a request that we delay implementing the new fees in the parking lots until we were able to install the pay station meters to add convenience for the users there, considering the 75-cent rate and the coins and so forth. The pay stations would make that easier. There was also an issue about what I called wayfaring signs, or what we call wayfaring signage, which is downtown signage in the downtown area, but not just exclusively in the downtown area, going beyond that to begin to direct people to where the parking facilities are in the downtown area. So even picking them up as far away as a freeway off-ramp or one of the major arterials that feed into the downtown area, to get people directions to our parking facilities. And finally, there was the request that we, through the use of signage, outreach, press release, GTV6, and we had even indicated to council we were going to use what we call ambassadors, who would be there for the transition period, to get information and direction to all users of the parking facilities in downtown, make sure that people understood what the changes were, what were going to take place, and what the implications of those were. So with that said, the 2 areas, and I'm sure there could be more, but the 2 areas that we wanted to expound on a little bit were, one, was the extension of the hours of enforcement, and more importantly, or more specifically, delaying those till after the first of the year. The Downtown Glendale Merchants Association feels very strongly that they would like to see those implemented as soon as possible, that being November, when the brand meters go into place. I'll have Mr. Bagnanian give you some background on that. He and his staff have met with the merchants. They met following our last meeting. As I said, I know you've gotten some correspondence from them. I'm sure Mr. Hall will be up here as well to discuss that. But I'll let Jono just give you a little bit of background on some of their concerns and reasons for asking for that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zern. Mr. Bagnanian.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, essentially after the council meeting, the Merchants Association contacted us. Primarily their concern is with the way our hours are right now from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Employees arrive early in the morning, they park in the brand parking spaces, the prime locations, and they park beyond the 9 a.m. for another 2 hours. They're able to move their vehicles so they can avoid citations. Their concern is, as soon as we put in the pay stations or on Brand Boulevard, they'd like to have they don't want to allow the employees to arrive early in the morning, probably 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., at least get a 2-hour free parking if the restriction starts at 9 a.m. If they want to pay for 2 hours, they can pay for 2 hours. Still, you got 4 hours of that space that is for the retail people were coming for shopping, that's going to be taken. So they would prefer that we start the restriction with the 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. immediately once we put the pay stations on brand. They're flexible as far as the parking lots are concerned, but for consistency purposes, so that we can make this all downtown, all the hours to be at the same time, they would prefer that the restrictions start from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. for the on-street meters and the off-street meters. They don't have any concern as far as the rate changes. The rate changes can be done, as Mr. Zern mentioned, when the parking pay stations are installed in the parking lots. We are going forward with the installation of the pay stations. We're waiting for the arrival of the pay stations that will be done in the next 2 weeks. All the electrical work has been identified, so middle of November we anticipate to install the pay stations and have all the signage in place so that we can start promoting them. So that was the number one concern of the merchants, and they have represented, Mr. Harry Hall is here to speak to that. The second item that I wanted to bring up for council is the issue about allowing disabled people with disabled placards to park in the parking structures. We did a survey of the usage of the disabled spaces, and in the three parking structures, Marketplace, Exchange, and Orange Street, we believe that our estimate is we will lose about $15,000 to $20,000 a year as far as if we allowed somebody with users with a placard to park in those structures. We did a survey of all the cities that have parking facilities like Huntington Beach, Beverly Hills, Inglewood, and Pasadena, for example. They do not provide free parking for the disabled people with the placards. There's a major concern about abuse of those, because if somebody has that, and if you allow disabled people to park for free in the structure, they can park there all day. Unfortunately, if they're abusing the system, they can pass on the placard, and there's no way for us to verify that that placard belongs to that individual. So there's a lot of abuse that can go on if we were to do that, in addition to the very conservative estimate of the loss of revenue, because if the abuse goes on, we estimate that the revenue increase, the revenue loss will be much more. As far as the other, we are working on a marketing plan, and we will develop that. You'll see that as we get ready to put in the pay stations on Brand Boulevard. With that, Mr. Mayor, we have three options we outlined in the report for the hours for council to consider. Option B is the one that I believe the Merchants Association is in favor of it. That's outlined in the staff report, and the motion also reflects that. Let me answer any more questions if you wish.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bennett. Very thorough as usual. Let me go to Councilmember Quintero.
I wasn't quite sure what you said. Did you say that the off-street lots will also be ready for the new parking system?
The off-street lot, we will be ready. We will install them in between January to April of next year. We're first going to put in 37 units on that.
Okay, so if that's the case, I'm very concerned in terms of those off-street lots that people who are interested in dining at Jack's or Damon's or any of the great restaurants we have at Mid-Brand, they're going to need an awful lot of quarters to feed that meter. I mean, they're going to be gone for a few hours, and so I'm not ready to do the 6 to 10 at those locations until we have the ability for them to pay and go have a nice meal. So, I mean, I hope everyone else is in agreement. With the meters on Brand, fine. If that's what the merchants want, I think that's a plus. That's going to work out great. But that off-street parking, I just think is going to lead to some real issues. I happen to keep a lot of quarters in all of my cars and my truck, but still, most people aren't that prepared.
Is that for laundry or tips, Mr. Quintero?
Strictly for parking meters.
Councilman Quintero, in that case, the option C is the one that would be consistent with what you're talking about. So we prepared those options.
Could you repeat that, Frank? Let me understand what. So if you change the hours,
right, in the back lot,
in the back 6 to 10,
right, someone going to Damon's Jack or any other Jack's or any other
So
restaurant,
between that 6 p.m. and 10 p.m., they're going to be...
a lot of quarters.
It's like they do during the day.
And the difference would be with the pay station
Right. They can do it
by credit card or whatever, so they won't actually be...
Right.
So it's not the amount of money, it's the actual physical...
Yeah, it's the physical having to feed.
Depositing it that you're raising. Okay.
What
That's all.
if you eat dinner 4 to 6, where are you putting quarters in?
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I just feel like we're putting pressure on people that maybe would spend more time, I just don't see that we need to do that. I mean, once the meters are in, that's a different story. If we could accomplish it in January, then, the minute that those meters are in those off-street lots, I think that's the time to go with the additional hours.
Mr. Najarian, did you get your answer that you...
he clarified.
Okay. Mr. Weaver and then Mr. Yusefian and...
Well, I'm with option B. The merchants want this. It's downtown, it's their neck of the woods. If they don't like it, if the people don't like it, the restaurants are going to hear it. From what I recall, an average time for dinner in a restaurant is estimated under 2 hours, closer to an hour and a half to sit down, eat, and leave, because they count on turnover ratios. I think Harry can verify that, but I think that's... So 2 hours is enough time to eat a meal. They're going to go shopping, that's something else. People can go into our lovely garages and park there and stay there all evening if they want. People will just have to learn. You carry a lot of quarters around till the meters are in there, or you go in the garages. I see nothing wrong with that.
Okay. Mr. Yusefian.
Well, I think we had Mrs. Portos here last time, and she was very much for option A. There's a reason why I don't like option C, because if you put meters in the front in Brand, and then you charge for Brand, and you make after 6 o'clock free in the back, guess where everybody's going to be back there? And nobody's going to be parking in the front. I think the merchants need to also realize currently there is no meters. There's no charge at all. It's zero on Brand. No charge. So you could park for 2 hours, pull your car, put somewhere else, park for 2 hours. You never pay. I don't care how many times you park and shift around. With meters, you're going to have to pay. Whether you shift your car or not, you're still going to have to pay. So, as you shift your cars 2, 3, 4 times, you are paying $2 here, $1 there, $2 there, and at one point you get to a point that you go, if you're a worker, you know what, I'll park in the Orange Street garage and pay my $3 for all day and stay there. It'll be cheaper for me. So that's, because you can buy a monthly fee. A monthly fee is about
$30, you said, right?
Yeah, for that area. So why wouldn't you? Yeah, it's like $1 a day. Why wouldn't you do that instead of park in the street or in the back? I do think that keeping it 9 to 6 until we have all of this equipment in is a better idea. When we get all the equipment in, then you change everything at once, then you go for that. I distinctly remember when we changed those times before. And I remember this room was packed. And I hate to say to Mr. Weaver or Mr. Harry Hall, the merchants are not the ones who are going to hear it. All I could say is, thank God I was not a member of the commission on the TPC, and I was not a council member, because boy, did they let the council have it. And I was not here. And thank God for that. And a lot of people came out and they said, we will never come back to Glendale. I got a ticket because they were going to Farniente or they were going to gazebos. I think that El Gazebo was still around. And they were used to coming to Glendale and going to El Gazebo. And after 6 o'clock, they didn't pay anything. And so they went, to El Gazebo, they had their meal, they came out, and there was a $38 ticket because they didn't know, they didn't feed the meter. So there was a lot of protests. So in my mind, I think if we just do A and make it consistent, so you don't have to remember where you pay till from 9 to 6, or which one is from 6 to 10, and just keep one thing consistent. One question that I have, when we did the mobility study, we were told you want to make your street parking the most expensive parking and your garage the cheapest one, correct?
The idea is you want an incentive for people to use the garage first and not the street. The garage would be based on price of first choice.
Brand Boulevard is $1 per hour, okay? And Orange Street is $1.50 an hour.
90 minutes free, though.
90 minutes free.
Why isn't Brand like $2?
Well, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Safian, Brand has a 2-hour time limit, so if you use the full 2 hours, that would be $2. You get 90 minutes free in the garage, so the idea is if you're going in there for that...
For 2 hours, it costs you only 50 cents. Okay. And you said when you put your placards up, you're going to mention that they could park in Orange Street garage and they're going to get a 90 minutes free?
Oh, yes, Mr.
Okay,
Safian. Part of our outreach program, part of our signage program will clearly indicate the advantage to parking in the garage, at least for the short term.
Then I'm fine with it. I just think it'll be simpler for option A. If I don't get the votes for option A, I'll go for option C. But I tend to agree. I also have several ashtrays, which I don't smoke, so it's full of quarters. So, but don't break into the car. That's where I keep my quarters.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, along with options A, B, and C, if I could, we're seeking some feedback on whether or not to include the disabled fee waiver for the
We'll get you a
garages.
consensus on that too, Mr. Zern, on the disabled issue. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr.
On the issue of the disabled, currently when I go to some of these parking garages, there is areas that is all painted blue. There'll be maybe 10 or... are those free? So, no. So you actually have to
They're
pay.
in the preferential spots
Yeah,
within the garage.
they're great locations.
They're not free. You get the regular, you would get the regular 90 minutes, and I think I would add, I believe a speaker at our last meeting indicated that when they go to Central Library in the marketplace, sometimes you stay longer than 2 hours. We actually offer you 3 hours right now if you're a library patron, so you get an extra hour of exemption to be a
so if you
library
get a little
patron.
stamp from library, you get 3 hours.
Correct.
All right. Mr. Najarian, and then we're going to go to the public.
Okay, a couple questions, Jono. First of all, the TPC's recommendation for the hours were what?
The TPC was the 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay.
That was their recommendation.
The letter that you got from the Downtown Glendale Merchants Association, I need to know, have an indication as to how many merchants are represented by that organization. How many merchants do they speak for when they write a letter saying that these are the hours that we want?
Councilman Najarian, I would want to defer that to Mr. Harry Hall, who is
Does Harry have
representing the president.
Okay, he can answer that when not now, but when you come up, Harry. There was also an issue about and I'm not sure that it really was an issue, but the equipment, the availability of the equipment. Is there going to be a situation where the Brand Boulevard pay stations are available, but not the parking lot behind Damon's?
Councilman Najarian, what we did is we placed an order for 37 immediately to put them on Brand, and we have an option for additional units for the parking lots. So our first phase is to install the ones on Brand.
Is this the November 4th?
Yes, that's our goal, is to do it in the middle of month, by mid-November, to have the pay stations in place, and then work, because of the parking lots involves additional electrical work that we have to do. There's some ADA issues we have to also look into, because where you put the pay stations, They have to have a clear path of travel to the pay station for the disabled. Those are things that it's going to take a little bit more time. So we said that as part of the implementation, we'll put the pay station in the lots starting in January and completing them by April. That's our time.
April, as late as April.
Yeah, but we will do the critical parking lots, like the lot number 6, which is behind the Portos. That would be number 1. That would be the first one that we will attack. And then the second ones are the ones off of Maryland that are behind, the Family Fitness on Maryland, north of Wilson Avenue.
Do you think that, the whole point, as I understand here, one of the major problems is that the employees are taking those brand spots. Do you think that if the pay stations come in on brand with the time restrictions, that they would then move to the back parking lots, though?
There's a potential if the hours are end at 6 p.m. in the parking lots, then the mostly part-time employees that arrive, say, around 4 o'clock, that they work in the restaurants or the bakeries or coffee shops, they'll start coming at 4 o'clock, going to the parking lots, maybe just pay for, 2 hours and then stay on for the rest of the night. But what we're recommending City Council is to look at the Orange Street Garage, for example, with a $30 monthly rate. That's almost $1 a day that they would be able to pay. So we feel potentially that could encourage the employees to go park in the structures instead of going to the parking lots. But for consistency purposes, it will be easier if the hours either stay 9 to 6 p.m. or go from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. in the lots and on street, because that way people don't get confused. The street parking is different than the parking lot parking.
And Saturday, Sunday, and holidays, what restrictions do we have?
The Saturday, the brand meters, we're recommending that be 7 days a week. The off-street, non-brand streets, that would be Saturday, 6 days a week. It will be free on Sundays. Some of the lots, like the lot number 6, which is the Porter, what we call the lot behind Porter's, that one is 7 days a week, because on weekends it also gets a lot of traffic, not only from the bakery, also from the Glendale Center Theater.
You're going to need some special signage.
Yes, those signage will be...
Make sure that those 7-day-a-week enforcements are made clear, because they could say, on Central it's only, you're free on Sundays.
Yeah, on Brand Boulevard, the signs that we're installing will clearly spell out 7 days a week, so people are aware of that.
Okay. As far as the handicap goes, the disabled, I'm not really keen on giving them a break. You have that tag because you're physically disabled, not because you're economically disabled. Zero emission vehicles, are there special? Those aren't the yellow that the hybrids use.
No.
There's a special, unique.
Yeah, they have special tags. We have to develop a process. We will work with the police department also to make sure that we're consistent, on a regional basis also. So if we can allow them to park for free, then we have a clearly a tag that for our enforcement purposes that's identifiable.
Do you have a loss of income estimate?
Depending, I don't think there will be a major loss of income because there's a limited number of...
Nancy Kent and Steve Ropfogel.
Yeah.
There's just a few.
There's going to be it will be very few of them right now. Hopefully
Chevy comes out with that new vehicle, the Volt.
If that becomes an issue,
have to adjust it perhaps.
We will come back to council with a recommendation.
Okay, let's go on here from the public. We only have a few speakers, and we can come back and chew on this some more. Mr. Hall, if you would, please.
We're not going to chew on him, are we?
Not on him, on it, meaning the topic, I hope. RD3.
Good evening, Mayor Draymond, members of council, city staff. How are we doing this evening? I'm here again in support of the meter plan downtown for the merchants. I had about a 20-minute conversation today with Raul Porto about it. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight. But, again, we wanted to reiterate a couple of different things. Number one, whatever plan we use, let's be consistent. If we do 9 to 6, let's be consistent front and back lot. If we do 6 and 10, let's be consistent and do it all at once. Let's not make the front one time, the back another time right now. If we go to do that at a different time, and change them all, if we go with 6 o'clock now and we decide to go to 10 later on in January or something, let's be consistent. Let's not confuse the public. It's confusing enough as it is. Number two is again, the abuse in the parking lots is done mostly by the employees. The reason we want to eventually go till after 6 o'clock, because whether they be employees of the bakery, which works 24/7, or Damon's or Jack's or anybody along the boulevard, a normal shift starts maybe at 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night. Even if they get there at 5, they feed the meter for an hour and they go away. And does the customer have a spot to park in? No, not at all. And that's why we're trying to do this, because we feel there's a tremendous amount of employee abuse. The city is being more than generous at lowering the rate to $30. Even an average part-time employee at 20 shifts a month, that's $1.50 a day. We're gonna actually make the employees save money, on a course of a monthly basis. As far as Mr. Najarian's question, the core group is about 30 or 40 people. Yes, we know we have, 200 and some odd businesses on the boulevard, but most of the abuse, and you can't do it block by block. Most of the abuse occurs in the 200 and 300 block, because that's where, especially the 300 block, is probably our most traffic block, with Portos and Damons on it. So that's, we've talked over the years, we've talked to other people, they understand, that we want to get the employees to park in the city lot, and we think this is the best way. And we think overall the consumer is going to have more opportunities to park. And quarters won't be an issue once we got. It's funny. I was in a lot before coming here, and a lady pulls out, and not only do people use the ashtrays that they don't use, but they have their manila envelope. Someone gets out of the car and they reach in their manila envelope, and they used to feeding the meters. But we definitely need to do something about it. Anybody have any questions?
We may. Let's get through the other two speakers. Right. Don't go far away, and there may be some questions for you, Mr. Hall. Thank you. Margaret Hammond, followed by Lenore Solis.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, staff, and members of the audience. My name is Margaret Hammond. I'm back here again beating on the drum about the disabled placards. Yes, a lot of seniors are on limited incomes. Some of them get $600 a month, $700 a month to live on. So if they are able to drive a car and they want to park and they have to pay for parking, that is not going to encourage them to come over to Brand Boulevard to shop. Now, I never did get the fact whether the meters were going to be free to the people that were using their placard on Brand or not. That was one thing, or in the rear lots. And also a lot of the seniors, I know a lot of them, they like to go to the Center Theater. It's one of the few things that they do kind of splurge on. And then if they have to turn around and pay for the meters, they usually carpool, a lot of them. If we're going, we'll go 3 to 4 to a car, and that way it saves cars and gas and so forth. But what I'm saying is, I thought under the state law that if it were city-owned parking or so forth, that you could use your placard for free parking. And I'll tell you another thing. I use that same placard when I go to Canada, in Toronto. I can use it anywhere I go. I take that placard. And believe it or not, it's recognized all over the world for various things. A preference in helping you off and on the boat, for instance, when you go on cruises, the planes, it helps. If you have, there's a long walk to the plane, like with me, my knee will not take going on great long walks. So I'm saying that if they have to park in the parking structures by any chance, and they do pay, I don't think very many of them will probably use them, parking structures, because then we have to walk all the way from the parking structure over to Brand or over to wherever. They're not located right on close to Porto's or close to the Center Theater or so forth. So that's all I'm saying. Think about that and how many seniors there are in Glendale. And just think about the thought that if a bunch of us went to AARP and started asking questions, how many letters you might get. But anyway, I'm just asking that. And I know it is abused. I've seen it abused. I've seen teenagers getting out and have a blue placard and have challenged them on it. And let me tell you, it was not well received. Matter of fact, my grandson got into almost a fist fight over a teenager using a blue placard. So I know it does happen. But all I'm doing is asking questions and think about the seniors. There's a heck of a lot of them in Glendale.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. Lenore Solis?
Good evening, Lenore Solis, resident of Glendale. You know, I have to complain about the valet service. Here we're going to put all these meters in, but I don't know how or how much they pay or what they have to do to get... I get my nails done on Brand between Colorado and Harvard, and you got the valet using the parking lot behind, you got the valet using half the street on Brand, and I just don't think it's fair. And I've gone to other places, and I mean, I've been having my nails done there since they opened, like 7 years now, and you started that about 4 years ago for those two, all those halls that are there that do dinners and all that, and it's just terrible for the businesses that are there. There's a restaurant there, there's the arcade, there's the nail shop, hair salons, and I mean, I have to go around the block sometimes 5 times to find parking. And I mean, I understand that you need to have the cars move out of there, and I know that like the Morrow Beauty College, all those students are parking on Brand, and it's a big problem. But I think you need to increase the number of handicap parking spaces on Brand, because even if you have handicap parking in the parking lots, that's still a long walk for people that are have an orthopedic disability and they have trouble ambulating. So you simply do not have enough handicap parking spaces on Brand. I mean, there's like one every block or two, like one on one end and one on the other. That's not enough. And I think there is a way to offer reduced parking rates for handicapped people. I see them do it at the hospitals. They show their placard, they got to show the registration certificate that comes with it, and if they still don't believe that that's who you are, you got to pull out your ID. So there is a way. I mean, you can't just run around with your placard without having, it tells you very clearly that you have to have your registration certificate with the placard, just like you have to have your registration in your car for your automobile. The registration comes with your placard, and you can check that. Give them a ticket. Let them go down and prove it to the PD that's really their placard. And I really think we have to consider, I understand we need turnover. I think we have to be careful because I know that, I mean, Burbank's right next door. They got a bunch of restaurants. They got the movie theater, and they don't charge for parking. So I don't know how they're able to do it with no meters on San Fernando, no meters anywhere around there. All the parking lots are free. How come they can offer free parking and we can't? So I know if I'm going to meet a whole bunch of my friends to go out to dinner and to the movies, guess what, folks? 4 or 5 cars, we're going to Burbank. So I just don't understand why we can't offer that here in Glendale. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solis. We have one more speaker card, Mike Mohill.
Good evening, Mayor. Mike Mohill. Lenore, to answer your question, how come the city of Glendale charges for parking? Simple. We need the revenue. Burbank doesn't. We have salaries and pensions to pay and benefits. I don't think Burbank has as many as we do. That's what we need to pay and charge. That's number one. Number two, I do not believe the handicapped people, I believe they should pay. People do not appreciate something that's free. That's anybody. Even, I used to get piano lessons, and I used to charge $1 to my friends. You know what? They barely appreciated that. They even wanted it free. I said, hey, I'm your friend. How about at least $1? Oh, okay. So, people can always, it's called priorities. Even though you're on limited income, if you can go to the restaurant and spend $5 or $10, $15 at a restaurant, you can afford to pay parking also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mohill. All right, that was our last speaker on this subject, so back to council. Let me see, either Mr. Zern or Mr. Bagdanian, you're pointing at something.
The legality of the...
Oh, did you want to say something, Mr. City Attorney?
About the
Not
handicap
particularly.
parking in the streets.
Meters are free.
Yeah. That's state law.
State.
Yeah. All right. Either Mr. Zern or Mr. Bagdanian, just so that I can help you get a consensus of opinion on some of this, we're looking at the disabled issue, the hours, the implementation, whether we implement it now all at once or later, and the, as a more minor issue, the zero-emission vehicles, and that about covered. Let me ask a question of Mr. Hall, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Hall.
Sir.
What you didn't mention in your topic was, of the options A, B, or C, which one you're asking us to support?
Well, let me...
Option B.
Yeah.
Option B.
Yeah, B was the one we wanted, because B was the one that had the 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. hours, because, again, of the employee abuse.
And you said you spent some time talking to Mr. Porto before you came here?
Yeah, we talked about 20 minutes this morning.
20 minutes of arguing in opposition, or 20 minutes of agreement?
No, he was on I was on Firestone Boulevard going by his new place that he's going to open a business in the city of Downey, and he was trying to tell me where, then we started talking about parking, and as I was going up about it. But,
in other words, is he a signatory to your letter?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the board, on the board of directors, I mean, the letter is really from the board.
So they're supporting option B as well?
Right.
Okay.
But again, we want you to consider and be fair with, that's what we want. You folks make the rules. I think to be fair to the public, we don't want to confuse them. Do one price on the front, one on the back, different times, 6 to 10 in the front and not in the back. Let's not confuse the
I think you're a
public.
very brave man, Mr. Hall, to ask the City Council of Glendale not to confuse the public.
And the other thing, if I may mention, Mr. Zern and Mr. Bagdassi can correct me on this. I believe they've already talked to the police department. When one of the outreach things that we're going to do when we start the program, when you get a citation, you're going to get a warning citation, I believe. And on that citation, there's going to be your license plate number, so you can't complain next time. So the next time one of the meter maids goes in and punches in, it's going to say, you've already got your warning letter on this license plate. You're getting a ticket this time.
All right, Mr. Hall, thank you. Let me see if there are any other questions for you while you're here. Mr. Weaver?
Okay, you've heard A, B, and C recommended up here.
Well, we want to go B because we think the employees
I
are
hear
abusing
you.
it.
That's what I said. But if you have a fallback, because we're going to try to get this thing through tonight, it takes 3 to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, if you think the fairness thing is to do 9 to 6 both ways at the same time and be even,
Would that be your second
that
choice?
would be the second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Yusefian, Mr. Najarian, anything? For Mr. Hall, that is.
No, not for Mr.
Yusefian.
After reading the staff report and the cost to the parking structures and the explanation from the city attorney, I seem to think that the state law should be followed, which we're going to follow. So if people parking in the street, anywhere in the street that is metered, if they have a placard, they don't pay anyway. So they are covered. So they could park right in front of a nail salon and just walk right in, and so they would not get dinged on that. The only place that they would have to pay would end up being in the 3 parking structures, and each one of the structures are providing currently a 90-minute free. So I think we should just continue with our current practice on this. Number 2, on the zero emissions, as I thought about it more and more, I think that we're going to go through a very lengthy process of trying to create a process of how to handle this vehicles as time goes on and more of these vehicles come online, like the Volt and so on and so forth. And we may end up in a position that somewhere down the line, 5 years down the line, when we try to take that away because gasoline engines are not used as much and there's more electric engines or zero-emission engines, then the public may think that this is something that we're getting for free and now we're going to take that away from them. I seem to think that, I think they're already contributing to the goodwill of this earth, and so giving $1 here and there is not going to hurt them. So I tend to walk away from that too at this junction. I'm fine with all the price increases. I don't have a problem with the price increases. I do have one big concern, and my concern, I go for option A, but if it doesn't work, then I'll have to rethink that. But I think option A is much better. I like to go to option B after we have all those equipment that is installed in the other back lots. I also like to see us come back, staff come back, so we can give you the money and authority to go and order those equipment, because you haven't even ordered them. Do you have the money even for ordering those? Because you ordered only 37.
Yeah, we
have money.
We have money for all the 37 and the...
Do you have money for the ones that are going to go on the back lots?
We have to allocate it as part from the parking fund.
So you do have that?
Yes, but we did, when we got the proposal from the vendor, was for the additional pay stations as well, so we could have a unit price that will not be increasing once we want to buy the rest of them.
Okay. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because it looks like we want to get those things installed, as expeditiously as possible. So I don't know what you're going to need from the council, but what I'm saying is if you need anything, please let us know so we can move forward with that.
Okay, let me jump in just for 1 second, because I think this will be, to find a consensus, I think this will be easier if each of us don't go through a long series. Yeah, let's tackle them one at a time, see where the differences are and see where we are. But let me start with what Mr. Yusefian has indicated for a starting point, and let me go in reverse order. He mentioned zero-emission vehicles. Mr. Najarian, where are you on that, as to whether or not they should be free or not free?
Or I'll say let them pay.
Okay.
Switch my mind up.
Okay. Mr. Quintero.
I think it should be free when we get to the point where there's so many zero-emission vehicles running around Glendale, then we'll start charging.
Okay. Mr. Weaver.
Later.
Okay, so are you saying goodbye to us, or are you...
I'd like to, but...
Okay. So you're a no. You're a no on that for now, correct?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Mr. Yusefian, when you were speaking about disabled, you were talking about the meters and public lots, which currently are controlled by state issues. So how about the parking structures? Where are you on that?
Stay consistent with the current practice.
So you're saying free?
No.
No, the current that we're doing now. Okay.
Right.
All right. So that is current. Okay. Mr. Najarian.
Status quo.
So current. Okay. And Mr. Quintero.
I would be willing to do it only, as one of the speakers mentioned, if the people manning the booths would get the registration from the holders of the blue cards. Otherwise, I'd say no. I mean, as recently as, I don't know, I guess it's been a couple of weeks, but a young man in a Pontiac Grand Prix with his blue
placard.
With his blue placard. So unless they can prove the registration
I've seen more exotic
and so
cars
forth,
than that with blue stickers.
Okay. So for now, current. Okay. And Mr. Weaver.
Current, and last week I saw a young man do the same thing in Orange Street Garage, park in the handicap and just walk on through the chest park.
Okay. On the issue of price, the price increases,
I'm fine.
Mr. Yusefian had indicated
the
he
chart
was
that they have.
for the,
This is
yes,
the chart, right? Table E1?
for the
Table 1,
recommendations here. Mr. Najarian.
I agree with the staff recommendation.
Okay. Mr. Quintero. Okay. And Mr. Weaver.
Yes.
Okay. What that leaves is the issue of the hours and implementation, and there we're talking about basically options. Now, your preference could be B, but a change to this, or A, but a change to that. But let's see where we are with that. So far, we have Mr. Weaver indicating he supports option B. Mr. Quintero, I don't think you expressed a specific option. You were talking about specific.
Right.
Well,
Ask a question because it may have a bearing on how you make up your mind. Did I hear correctly that every single vehicle is going to get a warning before they get a true ticket?
Yes, that's what our plan is for.
Every single. So when they're punching up your license plate and it shows that you have not received a warning, then you get a warning instead of a ticket.
Yeah, for a period of time. We will not be doing this for a long time. The police department...
Months?
2 weeks. That's our...
2 weeks?
Right.
So I'm going to extend that?
2 weeks, if you show up there after 2 weeks.
Council's direction is to extend it further. We will do that. But in cities that have implemented this type of pay for parking, pay stations, they've ranged between a week to 2 weeks.
So if we extend that, I would feel very comfortable going to B. Because you know that they've had their official warning, and the first one's on the city type of thing. You really can't complain about being surprised by these new rates and new hours. So
let me also indicate I haven't actually spoken on this myself yet. I support option B, and that was going to be one of my concerns about it. These hours have to go till 10 p.m. They absolutely have to, and the meters and all of the time changes need to occur now, not after the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter is going to be critical, especially this year, for the merchants, and it's not just the restaurant owners on mid-brand, it's all of the small businesses on brand. Everything we can do to create a turnover of parking spaces is going to be critical for their success this year. And generally, in any business district, that's where the issues are. It's with the employee parking. So Mr. Hall is absolutely right. At least that's my experience. And as you know, Jono, we created a new parking ordinance up in Montrose. It was the same idea, exact same idea, and it was so that the abuses from the employees were minimized. Now, as to people not understanding and being confused, they're not confused when they go to another city, and it's a different method. As Lenore points out, they go to Burbank, they don't pay anything, and they come to Glendale, they know they have to pay something. They don't stand there bewildered looking at the meter going, oh my God, what do I do? I don't know how to handle this. Or they go to Pasadena, where it's, by Glendale standards, very expensive to park, and the time goes till, even midnight on certain nights, the limits. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I found out because I got a parking ticket there one time on a... It's even better. You get a bit bigger laugh. They have a list on their meters as to what constitutes a holiday. Silly me, I went to Pasadena to go to Sunday brunch one Easter. Didn't put money in the meter. I thought, Easter's a holiday. Wrong. Martin Luther King Day is. So that one you get free, but Easter you're not going to get free. So let that be a lesson to you. It was an expensive ticket. But in any case, I don't think that our citizens are going to be in a state of just utter bewilderment standing out on the sidewalk. And I would say, if that happens, we all know to walk up to people bewildered in front of a meter and help them understand. But the caveat to that in my mind is what Councilmember Najarian was talking about. Without that, I couldn't support B, but with that sort of warning process that's somewhat extended, then I would support B. I don't know who of my colleagues feel that way, but let's go on down the line and see.
I'll go option B.
And Mr. Weaver's already on the record for that. So in terms of, and Mr. Yusefian, you didn't get a chance.
I'll go for B if we give that warning. And I think I'm hoping that the warning is not like 10 o'clock in the morning. I mean, if you parked in 10 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you're getting a ticket. But the warning is for going from 6 to 10. So if somebody parked there at 7 o'clock at night, a police officer shows up there, sees that they've done it, they do a warning ticket in there.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember 7, we're also going to use that for the new meters because of some of the confusion and how to do those. So you're not just the hours of enforcement, but also the meters that may be taking a little bit.
Right, but I'm assuming, maybe, I don't know.
We're not giving a grace period for the existing hours.
Existing hours of operation. Grace period is for the additional hours of operation, and that would be fine.
For the new meters.
Yeah, for the new brand.
All right, so in terms of hours and implementation, we're talking, let's talk about the option. I think we're pretty well on option B with that caveat about the warning. In terms of the implementation, are we talking about now, or are we talking about after?
That's B.
That's in B, but I want to make sure my colleagues are
November.
Remembering that's also a part of that.
Yeah, it's on November, you change all the times and everything else, and...
All right, so to recap, gentlemen, on the price issue, Yusefian, Najarian, Quintero, Weaver, and Draymond are yes on the increases that are suggested in the report. On the disabled issue, Yusefian, Najarian, Quintero, Weaver, and Draymond all agree on the current policy. On the hours, we are looking at option B, and that seems to be unanimous with the...
How long of a grace period, Mr. Mayor?
Well, and let's come back to that in a second. We'll get an answer for you on that. In terms of option B with the issue related to the warning, in terms of implementation, all are in agreement on implementing that November. And then in terms of the zero-emission vehicles, looks like Yusefian, Najarian, Quintero, Weaver, and Draymond are all saying no to that for now. So, and we'll see how that goes. Now, about the grace period.
I said to January 1st. This way, it would give enough time for people to go and park, because we did this last time. It was a couple of weeks. Some people just don't go park there. And the reason they get tickets is most of them who get tickets are people who actually live in the city, because they just automatically assume it's like somebody like me. I know anything after 6 o'clock, I don't have to pay. So I just go park. I don't even look at the meter. I just walk over. And so this way, at least when you get that warning, it's going to let me know next time I better put some money in it. So I think if you give enough time till January, that will be what, it's, October is almost done. So November, December, yeah.
7.
You don't want to ruin Christmas.
In 7 weeks, they know what's going on.
Yeah,
Even if you don't go to Glendale downtown, I'm pretty sure in 7 weeks somebody's going to be coming down to Glendale to do some kind of a shopping or whatever.
Okay. Councilmember Najarian. On the length of the...
I was going to say 30 days, but that's not set in stone. I'll say 30 days, but I'll reserve the right to move on that.
All right. Councilmember Quintero.
I think we should give them a good amount of time, 30, 45, whatever. I mean, there's small businesses on that street that I'm sure are struggling, and we need to do everything we can to encourage people to show up. So I'm for giving them plenty of grace period that works well for the merchants.
Okay. Mr. Weaver.
Well, I don't want to ruin Christmas holiday spirit, but I think it should go past the 1st of the year, maybe like the 10th, so you can get past the Christmas holiday and New Year's. So
somewhere between New Year's and Valentine's Day, huh?
No, the 10th of January. Okay. Sounds good to me.
All right. Yeah, I agree also. I think it should be in January. I think if we're going to give a grace period, let's give a grace period that gets us through the Christmas shopping season, and
Returning of gifts.
It'll come into play in the new year with a bunch of other new laws. So,
Sounds good to me.
10th for the first Monday.
So you're saying January 1st then, is that?
January 1st, or January
10 is good.
No, just January 1st is a holiday.
Our
You
meeting
don't-
is
second week in January, or mid-January.
Yeah.
It's fine.
That's good.
Whatever exact date.
January 10th?
January
Yeah, let's
10th.
make sure it's after the Epiphany.
January 10th is a Saturday.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
You're welcome.
Going to do it on the 12th, start on a Monday?
Start on the Monday.
Start on a Monday.
12th.
Well,
You know what, I do have a technical question, though. That doesn't mean that someone is going to get that first warning ticket and say, hey, this isn't bad, I think I'll do it again. Will they get a second warning ticket, a third warning ticket?
No, the
It's going to
second
be
is
one and you're out.
It's just that after the 12th of January, you won't get a warning. Mr. Weaver.
Steph, I'd like to suggest, curiosity, where are all the people that go to 24-hour fitness going to go when they show up at 6, 7 in the morning? Where are they going to disperse to? The lot behind, or are they going to start into the residential streets? You might just kind of observe for a while what's going to happen.
They're just going to have to pay.
That should be interesting. And the other thing, for a later date, all the new parking meters, the revenue coming in, will we consider putting that into the new fund, since that's all brand-new funding, rather than putting it into the current parking fund? I think we want to talk about that in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
We're coming back with that.
Yeah. That was a topic from earlier. Yes, Mr. Yusefian.
One big thing that I was kind of disappointed, and I think you would be disappointed too, and it has to do with signage, and it's going to be postponed. I know you wanted the neons, I just wanted a sign. When is that going to happen? Because in my mind, that is the most important thing.
Mr. Mayor,
I mean,
Councilmember
I
Yusefian.
saw in the staff report that the staff is going to be work with the planning department and so on and so forth. I just want to know when that's going to happen.
Well, Mr. Loomis just happens to be here. He might have an idea when...
When we're going to see the signs? Are we going to see it by the 1st at least?
And I assume you mean the wayfaring signs for the general direction
Right.
of
So
that.
as I'm driving 2 blocks down, I look and there's an arrow, or there is a neon, or is it just a sign that tells me it's a public
Whatever it
parking?
is, when will we be?
There's, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there's the larger issue of this that Mr. Loomis and my staff is working on regarding the wayfaring signs. But I'll tell you what, I mean, I have a shop that makes signs. I think as we get to the 1st and when these new operational hours and rates go in, I can put up signage that will help. And then as the new sign program comes into place, whether it's neon or something very nice or something that looks better than my aluminum sign blanks that are just painted, we can replace them. But in the meantime, Jono and I will work with my staff down at the sign shop, and we'll start laying signs out as soon as we can.
Okay.
They may be replaced later, as I said, after the report from Mr. Loomis and Jono come in. But for the time being, I can put up signs. They may not be the prettiest in the world, but the idea is trying to get people to the right place, and that's what we'll work on. So.
All right, very good. Thank you for asking that, Mr. Yusefian. Good point, I missed it. All right, any other comment?
Need a motion.
We do.
One.
We do?
Move 8C. Oh, wait, I'll introduce the urgency ordinance.
The only change you'll see next week on the urgency ordinance is really the deletion of the zero emissions vehicle for free. Everything else is already as you've mentioned it.
Well, no, with B will be there with
That's the separate
grace
motion.
period.
That's the separate motion.
No?
That will be in C2. That'll come up after your introduction of the ordinance.
So I've introduced the ordinance, now I'd like to move 8C2 with option B.
Second. And a grace period of January 12th, 2009.
Right.
Okay.
Warning period.
All right.
Council members Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Draymond.
Yes. All right. Now, on...
Harry, go tell Mr. Porter. Oh, no.
All right, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Kisaki, please. Our next item?
We now return to oral communication, and discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision, and the city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for an investigation and report.
Okay, our first speaker is Tamara Movsesian. I don't see her, so we'll come back to her if she returns. Dottie Yelsik, followed by Christian Arbit.
Dottie Yelsik, resident of Glendale, California, not Glendale, Arizona, Glendale, California. Okay, I've been to this council before, and I know you're probably as tired of this as I am, but again, this is about the incident that I was involved in on September 21st in Verdugo Park about the security guard that approached a group of us and told us to move our vehicles or we would not be able to do that, remove our vehicles from the park until 6 o'clock in the evening. We had to remove them by 10:30 in the morning. The security guard spoke to us at 7:15 in the morning. Now, my question, I keep coming to the council, I have not had an opportunity or taken the opportunity to be in contact with Sergeant Thomas Lorenz because, quite frankly, I haven't felt up to it. But I'm back on the trail, and I really hope to get this resolved for every user of that park. Now, at last, and I hope to do that in writing, because one thing I want to really avoid is double talk and what I call weasel words, because I don't know what else to call them. So maybe if there's someone that can give me a better word than weasel words and double talk, I'll be happy to use it. Okay. At last council meeting, City Manager Starbird said that the city had asked the permit holder to provide security. Now, who is the city? That's what I would call a weasel word. And the second thing is in the permit, there was nothing that said the lower level of that parking lot was off limits, not one word. As a matter of fact, when the boxing promoter was here, the projection for the number of police officers that would be needed for the boxing event was 10 plus a sergeant. For this event, and that was 10 and a sergeant for the boxing event, and that was projected for, I believe, 1,900, 1,000, or 1,200 people. This event was scheduled for 1,500 people, and there were 3 officers and 1 parking supervisor. Now, I don't know what category this private security guard falls into, because the police officers were to be there from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., the parking supervisor from 9 o'clock until 7 p.m., and then just kind of slid into the permit was a clause that said security or private crosswalk company is to staff the signalized crosswalk at the start, at the Verdugo Park entrance on Cañada Boulevard at 11 a.m. until 7 p.m. Now, what in the world is a private crosswalk company? So I'm still on the trail, still trying to get answers, and I hope sometime I can come up here and talk about something else. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Yelsik. Let's see, Christian Arbit, followed by Barry Allen.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and fellow council members. My name is Christian Arbit, resident of Glendale. I had the pleasure of attending the housing program on Saturday at the Pacific Park, and it was a program that was put on by Glendale's Community Development and Housing. Excluding city staff and council members Nigerian and Yusafian, there were approximately 50 people plus or minus in attendance. I attended a breakout session on foreclosures where 2 other members of the public had appeared. The presentation was held by an individual who apparently is a self-appointed foreclosure expert that works for a 501c3, and in my opinion, as a real estate broker and professional loss mitigator that specializes in getting people out of foreclosure, the speaker was more of a figurehead than anything else. The speaker was not a licensed real estate professional, And with that in mind, he most likely has never negotiated a short sale or pre-foreclosure in his career, as all individuals who negotiate real estate transactions or represent a homeowner in California must be licensed by the California Department of Real Estate. So prior to asking my first question to the speaker, I introduced myself by name, and the speaker's immediate response was, "I know who you are. I was already warned about you." So I let the comment slide. Not a big deal, and I can continue with my question. After the meeting, I asked the gentleman if he felt I had bothered or intimidated him by my presence. He responded with no, but I was warned about you. When you walked into the main area of the courtyard, someone warned me to watch out for the guy wearing the Hawaiian shirt. He continued, at the last event, we kicked out 2 individuals that worked in the foreclosure industry, and we asked them to leave since that meeting was being held at the Christian Center, which is private property, inferring that no one could ask me to leave since we were on a public property at a public park. So what was there to be warned about, and why? Are some people frightened by the truth, or maybe an individual that carries true intimate knowledge about a certain topic or an event? There's absolutely no reason why anyone would deliver that type of disrespect to a Glendale resident or a business owner, much less a city that sells themselves to be the premier city, or as recently touted, one of the friendliest business cities around. Is that the definition of the city being friendly? That situation occurred on the city's watch and under the direction of the Community Development and Housing. Or should I say it was our event, as Glendale taxpayers paid for it. So why bring in the scraps from other cities to speak at a Glendale function and have the city endorse that company when that company is not even from the city of Glendale? There are plenty of real estate professionals in Glendale, some good, others better, but only a few that are true experts in foreclosure. The city certifiably failed to procure that expert. So my question is, why would anyone conjure up the idea of asking a member of the public to leave an event that is touted as public outreach or homeowner education? Moreover, an event that is being sponsored by the city and paid for by taxpayer dollars. Could it be because the speaker that was featured at that meeting was nothing more than a hack? That liability falls on the shoulders of the city and the department that would endorse such an event. Thankfully, I was standing on public property. Otherwise, I would have been shown the door. Maybe the public should be warned that if anyone decides to speak publicly or in Glendale before the city, one better make sure to censor their comments, as the next time you might appear at a public event, the city might throw you out. Was this event designed to be a meaningful and educational housing fair, and one that truly helps homeowners? Did a lot of thought and planning really go into this, or was it an event for the city just to say, oh well, we tried and only a few had showed? A front-page article written in the Glendale News Press on Saturday morning featured an illustrious article that featured the event but failed to share with readers what time and what place. The basics, just pure logic. Great article. I read it. I'm interested. Now where do I go and what time should I be there? Why don't we all just forget about the housing crisis and just chalk up the day as a nice sunny afternoon at the park, boasting free water and cookies paid for by Glendale's own Community Housing and Development. Thank you for the opportunity and allowing me to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Arbin. Barry Allen, followed by Mike Mohill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, of course, the staff, and more importantly, the public. Last week, one of the agenda items was the aggressive solicitation ordinance. And I think that one of the things that was not discussed was other departments in the city government who do their own charitable solicitation, some aggressive, some not. And I think at some point, the city council or city management needs to coordinate these events that use city resources, city personnel, city equipment, and block city streets to collect money for charities that aren't even in Glendale. That's one thing, and I think that needs to be looked into. And certainly for those of you who read Vanguard, you would have seen the article on it in depth this past week. Now, the other thing I think is very important, today, more so than ever, The public is asking for transparency, and they're asking for openness in government. We've seen what's happened in Washington. We've seen all the things that happen behind closed doors. And we see the problem that happens even here in this chamber, where the city manager requested that the city attorney look into why certain documents were left on the table at the back of the room, even though they violate the Administrative Procedures Manual. Now, that is something that the city manager took on himself when the city council a year or so ago said they really didn't want to go there on to violate First Amendment rights. And one of the issues that came up was the lobby is messy. Well, you have an Administrative Procedures Manual, and the lobby is still messy. And last week, on 2 occasions, the city manager requested that I remove materials that were on that table that were part of a presentation to be put into the public record, which, according to the white sign at the back of the room, is certainly permissible. And I think at some point, this council has to stand back and say, the Administrative Procedures Manual is something that is designed for the employees and the administrative procedures in the city, not to control the public, not to control the First Amendment. And I think it's time that this council said, we have to start directing the city manager instead of vice versa. And I'd leave you with that. And also, a number of people have been stopping me. They want to know where to get Vanguard. Here's where they can get it. They can call this number or email this address, and certainly it will be. Is it coming out there? So look.
Seems like it.
No, too small?
Seems like it.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, that's what you can do. And if worse comes to worse, now that, and I welcome you back, Mr. Kostakian, our city clerk. I've missed you. And certainly I'm happy that you're feeling better. So if you really need to get in touch with Vanguard, I'm quite sure that the city clerk's office will expedite that call. Thank you. Barry Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mike Mohill, followed by Lenore Solis.
Artie, I just found out today, don't hit the clock, please, that there's a clock here. I never knew this was for here. I swear to God, I've been here all this time. Barry Allen said the other day, Mike, there's a clock that tells you to speed up or slow. I said, I never saw that before. So today I got 5 minutes. I got to hurry up. So, wait a second. We haven't started yet.
I have.
Yeah, this is Beat the Clock, you know? Remember that program on TV?
But I have. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Mohel.
Thank you, Artie. Nice to see you back. Okay. The recession is here, gentlemen. I come before you tonight with a heavy heart. Every day the news of the economy gets gloomier and gloomier. And at last week's budget session on how to find new taxes, I felt that nobody on this dais had been reading the newspapers, listening to talk radio, or watching the business news on television. Councilman Weaver defended the city employees again by saying how hard they worked and have great pride in working for the city. Well, Mr. Weaver, if I were overpaid compared to the private industry, I would also work hard to keep this gravy train afloat. By the different city unions giving generously to you, to your political campaign, and to others, the 5 of you have continued this irresponsible behavior of overpaying these employees. But at least recently, Councilman Yusefian has seen the light, and he no longer supports giving generously to the city unions. According to the comprehensive annual financial report ending June 2007, for the past 6 years, the GWP transferred $134 million to the general fund to pay for mainly city workers' salaries and benefits. Gentlemen, have you ever heard of Proposition 13? You know, that benefit that you and I get for staying in our homes for many years? By the city council increasing our utility rates and then transferring that money to the general fund, it's actually, in my opinion, against the spirit of Prop 13. Yes, the city council just skirted the law. Mr. Weaver stated that the council criticism was absolutely ridiculous. Noted that there was no way for anyone to predict in June the financial turmoil local governments would be facing today. All projections were positive, said Mr. Weaver. Councilman Weaver obviously never reads the financial news other than what's good for the city employees or taking a college class in budgeting. Relying on experts to tell him that home prices were never going to bubble out or that the gravy train for taxes for the city of all sources would never dry out with just foolish thinking. Buy now and pay later has been the philosophy of you and your colleagues these past 6 years. Knowing that the city was running on empty, you and your colleagues continued generously to overpay city employees with salaries and pensions, plus purchasing property with no planned usage or open space without appraisal has been damn right irresponsible and childlike. Did you and your colleagues think that seeing the city reserves dwindle from $600 million to $430 million, extremely to $140 million, prudent? Did you and your colleagues need an expert to tell you that reserve shrinkage during good times was damn right stupid? I do not have a degree in economics, Mr. Weaver, but I do know that massaging the numbers to keep the budget works has serious shortcomings. In the past year, I have seen the council not only give generously to city salaries, but spend $8.25 million for the purchase of Rock Haven. Nowadays, talk in council chambers to build an aquatic center, Mr. Nazarian, or complete a anticipated purchase of the Verdugo Hills Golf Course. Why, Councilman, if our city is running on empty? How is it now that the largest employer in the city is the city of Glendale, not hospitals or retail stores? Okay? Why is Councilman in our city still running on empty? No, gentlemen, nothing is your fault for not having a crystal ball. But you can now show the general public that you plan to take immediate action by eliminating one of your major sources of expenses. You got it, salaries and pensions. I spoke for an hour with Mr. Doyle, the manager of Human Resources, last week, and he explained to me how our city employees could be laid off and how by changing the charter, the city can run more like a private business and not a monopoly. Yes, have civil service protection, but retire with only a 401k and Social Security. According to newspaper article, just another 60 seconds, please. According to newspaper article, the first responsibility of our city council...
No, sir, we're not going to go another 60 seconds, but if you'd like to conclude, you can.
Okay. In conclusion, please talk with Mr. Doyle and see how we can change the charter so that everybody that works for the city gets a 401k and Social Security, like the private industry. By doing that, the city will be in budget. Or otherwise, if we don't do that, we'll be bankrupt. And come April, if things are not changed, I'm sure the electorate will pick 3 new councilmen. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mulhill.
Mr. Artie, let me just give you a couple copies here, so if other people would like to see my report.
Mr. Mulhill, if you could relinquish the podium, please. There's someone waiting right behind you. Lenore Solis, followed by Margaret Hammond.
Good evening, Lenore Solis, resident of Glendale. 3 items. Still waiting for that sign on Glendale Boulevard that indicates, or San Fernando, that indicates which way is Glendale Avenue and which way is Glendale Boulevard in L.A., because it's a problem. Second issue, and I probably should shoot myself for bringing this up, but the Duran Railroad crossing. I know I read in the paper that it was going to be closed. I know I sat here and heard something about its closure, so we had a meeting in Atwater, the Atwater Village Neighborhood Council called a meeting. We had MTA, we had DOT, we had the Council District 4, Tom LaBonge's representative, because that's Atwater, but that's his portion there. And they said, no, it's not going to be closed. And I said, well, yes, I mean, I heard that Glendale's closing it. And he said, well, how can Glendale close it when that's in L.A.? I said, well, wasn't there an agreement or something? He says, there was an agreement, but L.A. was not a part of that agreement. So they showed us extensive plans to upgrade the Durand Railroad crossing and also to upgrade the Broadway Railroad crossing. So you can imagine, we sent out, we did outreach there in the business community where Durand and San Fernando West is located, and we had several business owners who were, of course, very concerned, very, very worried about that being closed, and so they were very relieved to find out that yes, Glendale would like to have it closed, and they would really would like that to happen, but that's not a done deal. I mean, that hasn't been, there's no ink on that contract yet. And Mr. LaBonge, who's the council person for that area, he made it very clear that they are not in favor of closing that crossing, so their office will do whatever they can to prevent that from closing. MTA said, hey, we have all these plans to upgrade it, so we're working, and they showed us all these extensive plans. They even showed us several slides that had the City of Glendale seal on them, so they were, I said, oh, those look like they're from Glendale. Yes, they are. So, I mean, I'm confused because, here they're telling us, no, they're not going to close it, but yet, and I was very happy to hear, Mr. Najarian saying how concerned he was regarding the people who were opposed to the Royal District process, because I'm sure now that you know that there's, I would say the majority of businesses on the LA side of that. Heard from one business on the Glendale side who said he didn't care if it was closed or not, but every business that was on that corner there made it very clear that they don't want that closed, and they also made it very clear that we need to upgrade that crossing and upgrade Broadway because it is very dangerous there because of it's too narrow and big semis can't cross there. So I don't know what's going on with that. I would love to have some clarification at a future date regarding, why did somebody say they're closing it if they're not closing it? And my third issue is that, I see the number of people that are here, and I know that you thought it was a good idea to move oral communications to the end, but maybe you could think about maybe once a month leaving it in the middle so that I heard from a senior citizen who said, well, I wanted to talk about the parking thing, and she thought that I said, no, you could have come because when it's, the agenda item, you could speak at that time, but she was under the impression that she'd have to wait till the end. So I just think that maybe you could make I don't know, if you're over 70 or something, you can speak. You could speak your oral communication item during the middle of the meeting. I don't know if that would be discriminatory. I don't know, but I just think that I've heard from a couple of people who are elderly who said they would like to, but they just can't stay here this late. So maybe you could think about. I don't know how you could remedy that, but I just would hate to think that there's somebody who wants to come and say something and they just don't do it because they don't want to be here until even for some people 10 o'clock is really late. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Elias. Margaret Hammond.
Good evening again, Mayor Dreeman, members of the council, staff, and audience here and out there. I'm hoping some of my friends have managed to stay up to hear the end of the council program, shall I say? Anyway, my name is Margaret Hammond. I am here for one thing to mention about the Patrons Club of the Glendale Community College. We're going to be having a luncheon up at the Castaway on Friday, November the 7th. And, the Patrons Club, we have 100 members. 40 of them are active. They've been around for about 61 years and have given to the students in scholarships and grant aids for deserving students, I should say. And I'd say probably hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. We do get support. There are some people that come. I think Councilman Weaver comes every year that I've heard, and others have attended in the past. We do, as I said before, give every penny that we get over expenses, and we try to keep expenses down. Make our own centerpieces, do all kinds, make our own favors, so forth. So we aren't extravagant in spending the money at all. We want everything we get to go to students. So anybody that would like to support us, the luncheon is $45, and you can call me at 242-7334. And our grand dame, Gertrude Ness, who's, 102 or 103, is going to model again this year. So we're all getting there, I'll tell you. Now, the other thing is about the Royal Boulevard is wonderful, because tomorrow, the approval of it is great, because tomorrow I understand from one of my friends that the Cottage Grove people are coming up for their historic preservation of their district. So I'm sure they're very happy that they know that one has gone through, and perhaps they'll have a chance to get theirs through. And finally, Councilman Najarian, contrary to your assumption that I was in favor of boxing just because I questioned the promoter's qualifications and insurance requirements, etc., I am also questioning the smoking rules. How will that affect the people who like to smoke at those kind of events in that auditorium? Will the smoking rules be enforced inside the auditorium and also in the parking lot? That'll be very interesting as to how that will affect the attendance at the event. All right, and I think that's really it. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. 1 second.
Do you want your notes?
Okay. All right, that is our last speaker for oral communications. Do I have any comments from council or staff? Mr. Najarian.
Yes, I was at that free housing seminar, and I'm sorry that Mr. Arvid was spoken to rudely, or I'm not sure if you were threatened to be thrown out, but you should have come directly. I'm not sure if I was there at the time. I left about 3:15, about 4 o'clock, but Mr. Yusefian, I know, as a champion for civil rights throughout the city, and I'm sure, I'm not kidding, I'm sure he would have, had you told him that you were being spoken to inappropriately by a lecturer, I'm sure he would have set the matter straight. So to the extent you were identified as a troublemaker, I'm not sure what you were identified as, but certainly haven't caused any trouble at council. You've given us some information on foreclosures for several weeks, and so I don't think it's anything from council that has trickled down to staff to be pointed out. Maybe you were pointed out as someone who is an expert in the field and who knows your stuff, and maybe put a warning to the speaker that, don't bamboozle this guy, keep it straight and narrow, because you may be called for any inaccuracies. So to that extent, I apologize that a representative indirectly from the city spoke inappropriately to you. For Lenore, we see the Doran crossing as a dangerous crossing due to its geographical configuration. There have been no steps taken to close that crossing, but we see it as dangerous. There may be different ways to make it safer by putting in some of the sealed corridor, the quad gates, the median, etc. But the biggest thing for you to be worried about, by speaking with Mr. Labange, are his plans for that section of a huge garbage dump with a waste to energy, which is going to bring thousands of garbage truck trips into that area. So you're aware of that. So just keep that on the radar. He's a dynamic person. Yes, politics are involved. So, anything with that crossing, anything that's done will only be done to make it more safe. And we will definitely take a look at the traffic patterns. And we realize that if you close Dorian, it's a long way around. But we definitely don't want anyone to be hurt. And there's a big propane tank sitting right at the corner there. So it could be, it's a unique situation. As far as Margaret goes, Margaret, I thought your grandfather was a boxer, or your dad.
Her husband.
Your husband. So you're against boxing, or you were for it?
I hated those black eyes and bloody noses.
Counsel.
Okay, so I won't assume, I'm not going to assume anything anymore, Margaret. I'll confirm my suspicions with you before I proclaim you a boxing advocate. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nizar. Anyone else? Mr. Yusefian.
A couple of questions that was asked by Mrs. Yelsik. I'd like to answer her since I have done events in the park before. The difference between one event and the other is that when you do a new event, generally the police department is very conservative. They will always man that its maximum capacity. As the events continue year after year after year, they adjust it based on what happens at the event. If the event goes without a lot of problems, they will bring down the number of officers. If the event ends up being really crazy and you have fights, then the number of officers are increased, or the event is just canceled. The permit is not issued. This particular event that has been going on there, it's been going on for at least 7 years. 11 years? 11 years. 11 years, but I think in the park is about 7. We've had it in other parks. And so, as time has gone by, they have realized that the issue is much less. That's why they allow you to bring your private security. Just so you know, even when I was doing Unity Fest, which is a city-sponsored event, the first year we had heavy presence by police, and the second year got smaller, and the third year got smaller. This was a city event, but this is typical of what the police department does. That's why you go out there and you pull the permit, it says one thing, and the discussions that took place in here, it said something else, because they're two different things. So, and I hope that you will get together with Sergeant Lawrence to deal with that. Anytime, I don't know why you think that the city is considered to be, what kind of a word was it?
Weasel.
A weasel.
Weasel. The city is City of Glendale. It is the bureaucracy here. That's what we mean when we say city. We're not talking about you, we're talking about the bureaucracy in this city. It's the city clerk, city manager, all of us, the staff, that's the city. The 2,000 employees, that's the city that does this. So anytime people say, did you get a permit? Did you go to the city? Did you get a permit from the city? Doesn't mean that people go to Mrs. Solis's house and knock at the door and say, hey, you live in the city, how about a permit? No, it means come here and get it. So I don't know what that means. So that deals with that. As far as the gentleman's concerned, Mr. Mayor, I was there till about 4:55. Actually, Scott had provided Lucy Varpetian, who was also there from the city attorney's office, and she was there. Madeline Blake was there. Peter Zovak was there. Courtney was there. Babolian was there. 2 people from neighborhood services were there. There was a lot of staff presence there. So if there was any issue, anyone could have immediately come to any of us, and we would have resolved it. I did see the gentleman there. I think he was having a good time and talking to Mr. Allen and was mingling with some of the staff people. I did not go to that particular meeting because I was literally swamped by all the individuals who had questions, and I basically became a routing person, as they would ask me questions in Armenian, and I would route them to Mr. Pavolian or to Madeline or to Neighborhood Services or whatever. Actually, at one point, I kind of got worried because they were completely surrounded me, and there was kind of an argument, who's first and who's second, and I told them, don't worry, I'm not leaving until everyone is taken care of. But I would tell you, I apologize if something of that sort happens. I would like to know the name of the speaker, so I will definitely talk to the staff. As you know, when we put this thing together, I told specifically staff to get a hold of people who know about these issues. They assured me these are the people who are doing this. So that's all I can do. I can just trust staff to provide me the services that they said they are going to. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Youssef. Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, I was going to tell Mr. Mohill, I wasn't at all surprised by these economic events, Mr. Mohill. This is something that I've been very much aware of, and I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, Forbes, Fortune, Business Week, Money, Kiplinger, and then I watch CNBC all day long. So it wasn't any surprise to me.
But a charter change.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver, anything?
Oh.
All right. Mr. Kasakian, I don't think we have any new business, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.